I mean, like, yeah, within 5 minutes, our class is pretty good.
It's like, turning up to a party, isn't it? Like, you can't give someone shit for turning up within 5 minutes of a stated start time.
I mean, you can, because you shouldn't turn up within the first half hour of a party being live.
I always do.
Party being live? What am I on about? What? A party starting?
Well, the party's always started when I walk in.
Well, the party has started because the stream has started, Karl.
Did you see that as well? Like, Kesha got like 1 billion streams on TikTok. Like, the song TikTok, not like the platform, although she probably got a following on that. And she celebrated because you get, like, when you get 1 billion streams, it sends you like a platinum Spotify logo. And she just poured a bottle of Jack Daniels on it and brushed her teeth with it. Just that thing, like, I wake up every morning and just brush my teeth with a bottle of Jack. And it's like, she actually did it, the mad woman.
Fair enough.
Well, hey, welcome to another episode of the Wiki Weekdays podcast. I'll be your host for this one, this week. I'm Karl. I'm joined as ever by the lovely and luscious Lucas Holland, off camera and off frame.
I'm not off camera, Karl. I'm on
I
camera.
always say,
right
I'm
now.
sorry. For me, you are, because I'm looking at my camera.
I'm not off camera, and I am here. And I have, because I had a bit of a sweet tooth moment. I've snuck a couple of sweets onto my desk.
Nice. Well, it is, like, the start of spooky season. It is October 2nd, 2024, on the day that we're recording this. So the official start of our month-ish of spooky season content, because me and you have been getting quite a bit ahead, haven't we?
I mean, a little bit, yeah. A little bit.
So what I was going to say is we're so far ahead that we didn't actually start planning for putting out spooky style content until we realized, oh shit, we're like 4 or 5 weeks ahead on our content.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't got time to record 3 or 4 more videos for October. So the podcasts, I think, are going to be centered around spooky or scary subjects, but the weekend videos might just be on evergreen topics because we record them in advance because Lucas is moving.
Apart from, Karl, the Patreon votes that have just gone live.
Yes, so there are Patreon votes that we will do by the end of the month. Hopefully you'll have moved and settled in by then, but we haven't got a full month solid of spooky or scary movie orientated subjects, although the podcast is going to try to be. And Lucas, have you got a good one? I know that logo from the thumbnail, so I imagine it. I think I know what you picked.
Mm-hmm. I'm presuming everyone knows what I've picked anyway.
Yes, and I've picked a slightly... I've gone in a slightly different direction.
Okay.
But it's still scary. But it's
scary,
scary,
scary in a different way.
It's scary in a different way because, horror and scare. What people find scary varies. Scary vary. But yeah, Lucas, before we just crack on with that, there is some general housekeeping to do, right? Such as announcing that, hey, who was the winner of last week's Which Wiki Won This Week competition? Like, it's a impromptu competition between myself and Lucas where we get our viewers, you guys at home, to vote on which wiki you thought won this week. And specifically, it's like which wiki you thought brought the best discussion, not necessarily the wiki that was on a subject that you personally find most interesting. It's about the discussion, not the wiki. Although, if you want to vote for me because you like my wiki pick, I'm not going to complain about that. Because I won last week with my pick of Jon Stewart. And that beat your pick, Lucas, of?
Dead Rising. And
yes.
I understand why. Because I was really happy with the discussion we had about Dead Rising. But I'm sure anyone who hasn't played Dead Rising was probably like, what the fuck are these people talking about?
What are they even on?
We got also, deep in the weeds.
We got so deep into those weeds, yes. And the other thing we need to draw attention to is our pet of the week. And where would it be, Lucas? Help me. Guide my finger. Which way?
You're going the right way, yeah.
Down here. This is our pet of the week, Ace. Do you know who submitted Ace, or do they not provide a name?
Oh, Karl.
Ace submitted by unknown.
Submitted by Ace themselves.
Ace has no master.
That's the thing. Ace is a cat, so that's technically true.
And the thing I like about the picture
again, most people on the Discord, either because of my settings or their own, just have like the first letter. So it's just submitted by G.
But you know what? It was submitted by AG, an absolute G. And a member of our Patreon. And if you think you've got a better pet picture than the picture of Ace submitted by AG, you can join our Patreon and go to our Discord and prove us wrong. You can also vote on all the pictures that you find there. And the thing I like about that picture is it's clearly taken and the cat was moving. It's like, Toby's profile picture in the office where he sits down for his office and he's already halfway out of the thing.
I don't believe there's like non-blurry photos of cats that exist.
Well, it reminds me of two of my favorite subreddits. I've sent you a few preview pictures of them, Lucas, on Discord.
Oh, okay,
One is Scrunkly Cats. And are you familiar with the term Scrunkly?
kind of.
It's like a new word the internet invented to describe cats or animals that just look like they're in a rough time. Do you like that classic one of like the cat that wakes up out of a weighted blanket? And it's
No,
just like he sees into the future.
the one that I'm most familiar with is where it's like the two chihuahuas in the car, and there's one that's like looking out the window and fine, and then another one that's ragged as fuck, like looks out the window like, oh.
Yeah, that's Scrunkly. So I've sent you some pictures on Discord. Look, the first picture you can see is a Scrunkly cat.
That, you know what, that fits the word Scrunkly.
That's the thing. Like, you hear the word and go, "What does that mean?" And you see an example, and you immediately go, "Okay, that's Scrunkly."
See, the second one looks more like action. That looks like The Flash.
Well, the second subreddit that I'm a fan of is pictures of blurry cats, and the next two is pictures of blurry cats. And people's getting pictures of their cats midway through an action or activity.
That second one that you've sent looks more like, and I'll copy these images and start putting them on screen. But yeah, the second one, which I'll put up first, is basically reminds me of, you know, in the Zack Snyder films where it's like Justice League or whatever, and they get the Flash
to show
and they
the
get
Flash
those weird like close up first person
of his face,
and it kind of reminds me of that for a little bit.
Yeah, like one of my favorite things about like Zack Snyder Flash is someone actually had like the balls to ask Zack Snyder, why does the Flash in your movie run like he's shat himself? And Zack Snyder explained that. Well, it's every like other movie
skating.
Yes, that's it. So his excuse for why the Flash runs like an idiot in his movies is that, well, every other movie just shows the Flash running really fast. And by every other movie, he means literally every other piece of media ever created that shows someone who's able to move fast, including DC Comics, in which the Flash, originates. Show him just running, but fast. Yeah, well, my opinion, if you're running that fast, you would not be able to create friction, which shows that he doesn't understand how the speed force works, because the speed force creates whatever friction you need, but whatever. So it'd be akin to speed skating, which is why the Flash takes like one step and he'll like slide like 800 feet. The problem with that is the whole point of the Flash is that while he's running super fast, he's able to turn on a dime.
Yeah.
That's why he takes like 8,000, because he's running. Say if I ran to the end of my street, the Flash would take the same amount of steps, but he'd do it in 1/100th of the time. And if while I was jogging down the street, there was a cat jumped in my way, and I definitely leapt around that cat, the Flash could also do that, just 100 times the speed. If the Flash took steps that were 100 foot per step, he would be crashing into shit all the time.
Yeah. And that is the second blurry picture there that Karl sent.
It's great, right? Because it just looks like this action shot.
I'll get the cat that defines Scrunkly up right now.
Yes.
Oh, this is a little one. This is a baby one.
You just look at it. It's like, it's so scrunk. So scrunkly.
So that's a Scrunkly cat for all of it.
There's no other way to describe that cat, right?
There isn't, no.
It's just, you're looking, okay, that's Scrunkly. And I love when the internet comes up with new words like that. It's like, oh, have you heard there's a new word? And they tell you that word's stupid. And they show you what it applies to. And you're like, okay, it makes sense.
It does make sense for that one. And Seraphin Guzman in chat says, do you think hairless cats are cute? And I don't necessarily think that they're cute looking. I always used to have a bit of a vendetta against the idea of them because, I do still think that breeding hairless animals is a bit unfair.
Unless you really look after it.
But, even then, I think just the idea of genetically breeding creatures that are meant to have fur to not have fur is a bit cruel.
Yeah.
But I did go to a cat cafe, and I ended up bonding with the one hairless cat they had there.
It saw your beard and it thought, I can have that.
It wanted to knit the beard, yeah. And I was like, okay, I'm turning around a little bit on, the idea of hairless cats being cute. But I still think the idea of breeding hairless animals is not really something we should do.
And they're, not hairless. They have, peach fuzz, from, my experience, petting one.
Not the one I petted. It was literally just, it felt like just absolute leathery skin.
Maybe I was petting a different kind of animal.
Very warm though, but that
maybe it was a super, one of those super short haired cats or something, I don't know.
Like, the idea of them feeling very warm to the touch means that they're losing a lot of heat, which is, you know, the bad part. You have to...
That's why they're like the lap cats, aren't they? That's why they're more, what's the word now, affectionate than other animals, because they just like to be near you for warmth.
Mm-hmm.
Which I can see, like, see the appeal of a pet that, you know, wants to spend time with you. Especially if you're used to cats, which like, fuck off, just defying gravity half the time.
And Karl, I do want to just loop round to just tease people what our Patreon votes for the month are.
Okay, so you've got a few examples of yours, yes?
So the ones that I'm talking about, I'm going to be talking about a spooky game, but I'm going to let people vote for which gaming generation I pick a spooky game from.
Okay, so it'd be like, you know, I'm guessing not
so
NES era, because
I'm going from the consoles that I owned onwards, being a 92 baby. So I've gone for like either PS1 N64 generation,
yes,
PS2 GameCube Xbox generation, PS3 Xbox 360 Wii generation, or PS4 Xbone, Wii U, and Switch.
Yep.
So it'll be those 4 votes of those 4 different generations of consoles, and whichever generation of consoles gets the most votes for, I'll pick a spooky game from that generation again.
And I've gone in a slightly different tack, and I've picked like what my scariest movie is, or the movie that I refuse to rewatch, or what I'd recommend. Like I've gone for like, you know, just a different kind of questioning to just get people's what's the word now? Curiosity piqued. I should also apologise. Well, I'm not in the best mood today because I'm ill.
Mm-hmm.
I'm real fucking ill. I have taken the most amount of vitamins. I've taken so many vitamins. I've had a boiling hot shower. I have blown my nose, and I have like just caked my face in like moisturizer. So hopefully, I know, just like my complexion was so washed out. It's when I looked in, I looked worse than Grim Reaper's passport photo. I look like a right piece. But hopefully, you know, that shouldn't be too much of an issue. But it does affect my voice, because my voice is a little croaky at the moment.
But going back to your votes, can you give us a little like hint to what they are?
Well, I sent them to you last week, so you just copy pasted them. Can you say them? I don't remember the exact wording that I used, because the wording is very specific.
The wording was quite specific. Let me just double check on my phone. And Fraser, we did get your super chat. We'll get to that in a second. Do not worry.
Yes.
However, I need to go this on my phone. So, Karl's going to do something along, like, you know, spooky movie vibes.
My favourite, genre.
He'll either be talking about his favourite spooky movie, is what he finds the scariest spooky movie, or his favourite spooky movie villain, or scariest spooky movie villain.
Yeah. So that will be either my favourite horror movie, scary movie, whatever you want to call it, the movie that I'm most scared of, so they won't be the same thing. So the movie that I think is the best horror movie is not necessarily the movie I'm most scared of watching. Likewise, it'll be either my favourite horror villain, or the horror villain I think is the scariest. Those aren't necessarily the same thing.
Just death and taxes. That's the scariest movie villain right there.
It's like that's what Final Destination's villain is, right? It's just the nebulous concept of death, which is scary. The idea that death not only has a sense of humour, but it wants its souls. And you literally cannot cheat death. That is a fascinating concept and a terrifying villain.
And Fraser does ask in chat with a super chat of £2. Thank you very much. Say, where's Boney at, Karl? It's spooky season.
No, he's retired. I'll get him in the midsection. He's like, he hangs up on a wall. He's got legs missing.
He's just having a rough time of it.
He was in a suitcase for a little bit. Also, that's more a Fact Fiend thing. That's why he's retired. Like, he's semi-retired like me from Fact Fiend.
Yes, true. And the reason why I haven't made any spooky efforts is because I'm trying to pack things up, not bring things out.
What's the thing? Just like the more empty your house gets, the scarier it gets, right? It's just like you just recording from just an empty, soulless room.
It's very funny. In my office right there is still my rock band stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we had someone come around and look at like inventory for movers.
Okay.
Just like give us a quote of how much it costs to move the house. Not the house itself, the furniture within the house.
Well, they can do that. In America, you can. You seen those
in
videos?
America, they used to be able to like deliver houses to you on trains, right?
Because their houses don't have proper foundations. That's why they all wash away in floods.
And this would be a bit rough because it's not only like a brick house, it's semi-detached, so I'd be bringing the neighbour with me.
Ah, it's fine. What do these movers say then?
But they walked into my office, saw the rock band gear, and was like, "Oh, I presume you don't want us moving all them guitars then?" And I was like, "Probably not. We'll probably move them ourselves." But I was like, "They're all cheap plastic gaming guitars, don't worry."
Yeah, they're cheap plastic gaming guitars, but they do
But
have
they're kind of
value in
not
the
now,
sense.
right?
Yeah, because they're difficult to replace.
Yeah. But
It's not like, oh, I don't mind like scuffing up my sofa or whatever. It's like, who
mhm.
gives a fuck? I'm sat on it, right? I'm gonna put a throw on it, and my dog's gonna fart on it. Whereas
Well, I
those
mean,
Guitar Hero controllers, if they break, you kind of need to get new ones. And
we
it's
want people to come in and move the big furniture, right? It's
yeah,
like I can fucking carry a Guitar Hero controller. It's just I can't pick up a sofa on my own or move a desk on my own. Like,
yeah, it's not ideal, right?
yeah, but it was very funny of just him walking in, going like, "Oh, I presume you don't want us touching any of your fancy guitars." I'm like, mate.
The thing is, if you're a real
You got the wrong
guitarist,
idea.
you'll have like I've got so many crap guitars around my house that I just don't give a fuck about. Then I've got my nice guitar that no one's allowed to touch.
Mhm.
That's how you do it.
And Karl, I
Yes,
know that I'm meant to be getting into my wiki now.
of course.
However, I just want to take a brief few minutes because I have got nowhere to vent right now about
Okay,
something that I've been experiencing.
so the podcast is slowly deviating from its original format
It
now.
is.
We're
I'm
probably
bringing
the
in
same.
a non-wiki section.
Well, to be fair, just write it down. And it's a wiki, right?
It's a
At the office, like
well,
read thoughts.
yeah. It's kind of a
Lucas
follow-up.
thoughts. Wiki.
It's kind of a follow-up because we recently did a wiki on Zelda, and
Yeah.
I have been playing Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, and I just kind of wanted to just talk to somebody or talk at somebody about this game for a couple of minutes.
I will accept this.
So I've had no one to talk to. So just like Karl, just be my
Soundboard. Yeah.
soundboard for a second, yeah. And everyone in chat wondering, I'm gonna talk like mechanics spoilers, but not so much like spoilers of story situations,
story.
gameplay, that kind of stuff. But I'm gonna try and keep things as vague as possible. But what I've got prepped is a little picture of Zelda right there. So while Zelda's on screen now, I'll be talking like very, very minor mechanical, mainly spoilers about the new Zelda. I just kind of vent in a little bit and give them my first impressions. But yes, if anyone's really just wanting to completely 100% not hit anything about it, then there you go. There's a little image for you to be sure that you're not missing out. But
Yes. I'd also say as well, if anyone out there would thinks, well, you really like gaming stuff, maybe you should have an outlet for that. Well, something myself and Luke's going to talk about. Is it not to be mentioned yet?
No, we can talk about it. I was just like, oh, sneaky.
Oh, I thought you were like doing the thing of like
no,
like
Karl knows.
All right, I thought you were saying like that's no, shut up. That's the signal to shut the fuck up.
No, it's all good.
Something myself and Lucas will be doing when Lucas finishes his move is revamping the Patreon to put some stretch goals on there. So we feel we'll be making content long enough now where we didn't feel comfortable putting stretch goals or anything until we had at least a year's worth of content to showcase, hey, this is the year's worth of stuff we've made. Clearly we're committed to this idea. We're going to keep making content.
And give you a good idea of like what our content is, what our consistency is going to be, what our schedule's going to be like, etc., etc.
Yeah, all those boring things no one really gives a fuck about. But something we're planning on doing is when Lucas gets settled into his new place is work towards a stretch goal of creating a gaming channel. Because myself and Lucas both used to run gaming channels, but just YouTube kind of shit the bed for gaming channels.
Mm-hmm.
And like, unless you were someone like who already had like millions of subscribers, they didn't really make much money. So myself and Lucas just refocused our efforts elsewhere, like Fact Fiend and Wiki Weekends, and I was like writing and stuff. But we both talked privately about the idea of bringing them back and just creating a joint gaming channel for Wiki Weekends where we do playthroughs, reviews, mini series that we've tested in the past and didn't really do anything with, like Fishing Fridays or Rough on Replay.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be a potential avenue for like, mini reviews of games myself and Lucas are interested in.
Yeah.
So keep an eye on the just watch this space for more news on that.
Exactly, yeah. And as we say, just at the moment, my next month or so is just up in the air with moving and everything. Like, got to move an entire house and dogs and stuff, and it's like, it's all
That's
just
the
a bit
hardest
of a
part,
mess.
right? You're going to lose one of them dogs in that new house. There's going to be like a skirting board loose somewhere and just going to see Cage go.
Well, we did discover today, or kind of confirm today, we've got a baby gate at the bottom of the steps, and Oryx, we think, has been shown by a different dog how to open it. Because we looked after someone else's sausage dog a little while ago, a couple of weeks back, and they figured out how to get past the baby gate, how to like claw it open. And then the other day, Oryx was downstairs as like Jenna had taken Cade for a walk, but there was a poo upstairs. And I was like,
where I live.
Well, I don't think it was me or Jenna. So I think it was Oryx, but he's downstairs. So what we did today is like, so what, like, we did a little test of like, I threw a couple of treats onto the stairs and walked around the corner to make him think that we weren't there anymore. And then I just heard like him licking at something, and I walked back around and he's on the stairs behind the baby gate eating the treats. No, like we left it shut.
It? So did he open it or did he get through the bars?
No, he opened it.
Okay, that's scary.
So, like, we basically have so that we don't have to unclip it every time, we just left it a little bit loose so that he just shuts over. Just thinking, they can't really do much about that, right? So, like, we're going to have to tighten up. But it's just like, how many times has he gone in and out without us knowing?
Yeah, where's he been? Where else? Like, when you're moving loose, you're going to be finding some dog poos in places you did not expect.
Oh, God. But anyway, yeah, talking about Zelda, just... I was very excited to play a Zelda for the first time, and the main gimmick behind Zelda Echoes of Wisdom is that you make echoes of objects, and like you've seen in the trailers, if anyone's watched them, it's like, well, you can put a bed on top of a bed on top of a bed and make like a little step bridge, right?
I play Fallout 4, yeah.
Yeah. And basically that's kind of the gimmick, and you get to copy enemies and things like that. And I was playing the start of the game, and I was like very back to slow starts of a Zelda game where the first couple of hours are like, okay, a lot of setup, a lot of not trusting me, a lot of talking at me.
But admittedly, there's a lot of things to onboard at once, right?
Mm-hmm. And it's like very much just going back to a lot of like kind of maybe Ocarina of Time onward kind of Zelda games where it's like those first couple of hours are like, come on, like give me the game.
It's like, I understand, like most games, like not most games, like stuff like Pokemon, where it has a mixed audience of adults and children, just needs the option of I've done this shit before.
Yeah, right. And it was just a lot of like every time going to do the first couple of like dungeon-esque kind of Zelda temple-y things in this game, the equivalent of, it's like, oh, the build up to the story is very much like, go speak to the Zora, go speak to this Zora. Oh, the Zoras are having a quabble. Like, go back and forth between both of them and talk. And then they're going to talk quite slowly at you, and they're animated quite slowly, and you can't skip through the dialogue very quickly because they play out all the animations for the characters. So, like, you can't even just mash through the text, and it's like talking at you a lot, and then a lot of like your companion coming in and telling you what just happened in that cutscene.
And then how much of this is just you want to get to the game, or how much of it is just you being an adult who's just limited time?
Yeah, right. And I found the game like frustrating to begin with, but then, Karl,
yes,
it's like it got to the point where I started getting more and more echoes. I started getting a little bit more experience and freedom in the game, and I will say, I did quite enjoy the fact that I was able to explore so much. But after those first two dungeons, it's probably a better idea to really start exploring then. I didn't do that, though. And I really enjoyed the fact that the game was like, go these two locations. Oh, you want to attach yourself to a spider and climb up a mountain and end up in the middle of nowhere, and you've got to, like,
why not
make a source of heat for yourself and carry it around with you and keep it safe during combat. And it just started opening up more and more, and just I'm now starting to see where like the special source of the game is.
Yes.
And it's gone from like, oh, this is like a really slow, kind of annoying, handholdy experience to begin with, of like, oh, okay, now like done the first couple of temples, that I've got the whole world like already unlocked because I'd just been curious and been going everywhere, and like the game allows you to, go up this mountain and fight things that are harder than you should have, and then you'll because whatever enemy you haven't killed before, that turns into an echo. So all of a sudden I was like, oh, but
no,
I've got this like later game enemy
is it
that
the
I've
problem
then
of
copied.
you've made yourself too powerful for the rest of the game?
No, because there's a cost incurred with each enemy that you copy. So like
so
each
until you
one is
level up.
like, oh, this one's going to cost 1 triangle to spawn. This is going to cost 5. And the ones that were really like late game that are worth like 5 to spawn in, I didn't have the 5 yet. So I couldn't spawn them in yet. It wouldn't let me bring out like the heavy hitters, but kind of like the medium hitters.
Yeah, so what's the issue then? Because I feel that this is leading towards a
no, it was just like, I think for anyone that's having that kind of frustrating first few hours with the game is like, stick with it, because
okay,
it gets so good. It gets so enjoyable and cool, and like the more echoes you unlock and the more you try to experiment with things, the better. Like I figured out some tech the other day where it's like, oh, okay, well, I can spawn a bird, and you can do this thing where reverse bond means you like bond magically to this bird, and you can move it around with bind. But then if you hold like R, you reverse bond, and you start following where it's going.
Okay.
So it can fly up into the air and start flying in circles, and you're following that movement and being dragged into the air and flown around.
Oh, so it's more just your complaints is it's just it doesn't get you into the good stuff right away. Because like Breath of the Wild, pretty much within what, like half an hour of gameplay, you have all 4 of your primary powers if you just follow the main story right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you get them like almost straight away, and you get the powers straight away, but because you're so limited on the amount of echoes you have, and like the fact that there's a couple of like really quite useful, powerful abilities buried within the first 2 temples as well. I won't say what they are, but like just stuff that's pretty useful to have early on for exploration and stuff. But just the more and more I explore and the more echoes I unlock, and the more I'm figuring out uses, like the better and better the game is getting, because like as I said, you can bind onto that bird and reverse bond, but that just means you're kind of in the air flying in circles. And I was like, okay, what else can you do with this? And then I figured out you can, while having that bird bonded to you, you can spawn a fish, pick up the fish, and the bird will fly after the fish. But the bird always stays... No, the bird always stays equidistant away from you. So the bird will be like a foot away from you. You pick up a fish, it tries to fly at the fish, but it's like a little carrot on a stick, and it just starts flying you across the map.
Oh, so it's like putting to the same pole of a magnet.
Mm-hmm.
And it pushes it along.
And it basically just means that you can figure out little ways like that, where you can like lift one thing up and spawn another thing and bind together, and just like, oh, now I've just got a way to like fly halfway across the map.
You imagine just like looking up and seeing that.
Just Link. Oh, sorry, Zelda in this game. Holding like a fucking fish above her head as a bird just magically flies next to her, like flying after the fish. I was like, oh man.
So that's why they're in charge.
And like, just it's getting to that point now where I'm like, oh, this is where like everything's unlocking in my brain, and the game's starting to really open up and give me everything, and I'm loving it so much now. And yeah, it's like, for anyone playing that game, just like stick with it, because the game gets so much better if you like give it a chance, because it is a frustrating start to the game for sure.
Its onboarding experience is classic, or akin to classic games, for better and for worse.
It's true, yeah. But I've had no one to talk about it, and I'm just like, the last like couple of hours I've had with the game, where I've started like, you know, seeing the matrix of the game, and I'm like figuring it all out and unlocking so many things. I'm like, oh man, this game's actually way better than I first gave it credit for.
Just doing all the calculations in your head of like, wait, well, does this work? And it's like, it does work. You're like, oh my god. And I just...
Yeah, it's very, very fun. And I would encourage people, like, I think as well, I started playing it as like, well, this is like a more top-down traditional Zelda game, and kind of using the sword ability a bit and like things like that. And just playing it quite safe. But the moment I treat it more like a sandbox experience, it's like, oh man, that's where the game is real fun.
Someone's going to play through that game with just like the basic sword echo and then give it a bad review.
Well, I can't wait to like do a stream of it where I try to do like bed only runs. Shit. Like, just try your best to be like bed only.
No, it's like that's the thing. Someone's going to do that, right? It's like I often think of our mutual friend who told me like his brother is the most frustrating person to watch play a video game because he absolutely refuses to engage with any mechanic that endangers you whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, in Bulletstorm, he absolutely refused to play Bulletstorm using the sliding or jumping mechanic because every time he took damage, he'd run and hide behind cover because he thought he was playing Call of Duty.
Treated it like a boring cover shooter and not like the run, jump, slide, action style trick shot game it was, yeah.
And no matter how much he told him, no, it's not Call of Duty. He wouldn't play like that. Same like Borderlands, where he only played as Axton and refused to do anything but hide behind cover and go for headshots. And refused to engage with any of the powers that didn't give him more accuracy.
It's like a lot of people that complained about Tears of the Kingdom of like, well, I found out that a bridge or a hover bike can complete any puzzle, and it's boring now. I'm like, okay, don't use that then. Try something else. Like, no one's forcing you to take the easy route apart from yourself.
Or when it's like, oh no, my weapon broke after I used it. We'll pick up one of like the 5,000 in-game items that interacts with the world in a unique, interesting way every single time it's used. No.
Yeah, like
the game is bad, but you're not engaging with the mechanics that they created. So, oh, the weapon durability system makes it too hard. It's like, but it's to encourage you to constantly be picking stuff up and utilizing your environment. No.
The amount of times in Tears of the Kingdom I've gone into a combat encounter and not even like used weapons because I've been doing all the other bullshit.
Yeah, but no, Lucas, the weapons break so they don't feel useless. Or you can look at it as the weapons break so you're encouraged to use them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's having time to think about it and look back on it. Breath of the Wild is the solution to the eternal RPG problem of hoarding elixirs and then saving to the end of the game when they're no longer useful. Just all your shit breaks, so you're constantly having to use everything you've got.
Or like the Destiny problem of like, well, I crafted the perfect weapon, now what?
Yeah, it's like, well, it breaks after a couple of attempts. It's like, oh no, I don't want to use this super powerful sword. I'm going to save it for when I need it. Well, if all your basic weapons break all the time you're going to quote unquote need it is going to come around a lot more than if you just had unbreakable weapons you could rely on for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
And then people give it a bad review. And I hate using the words like you're playing it wrong, but you're playing like it's such an ingenious, elegant solution to that issue that everybody talks about with RPGs.
I just say, like, I can't wait for people to be like, well, I just used one echo in Zelda and it was really boring. Did you try any other? Okay, then, sure. It's like the other day, I was like, okay, I'm using these water blocks a lot. Like, I'll try and use something else. And then I was like, oh, I can attach myself to a flying tile.
Mm-hmm.
And they just fly. I was like, let's see what happens if I do this and do this with it. And then try that. And again, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds because I know it's a new game. But yeah, just really fun. And I'm going to get into my wiki now.
Yes.
So I'll take...
That's a story for another day. That's a story for the gaming channel, if it ever gets made.
Mm-hmm. Hell yeah.
So what have you brought for us today, my friend?
Well then, time to go from one gaming channel thing to another.
Which is?
So you have seen what is on the thumbnail for this podcast,
I have,
right?
yes.
And a lot of people in the chat, as we started the stream, like speculating what this game is. So I did refrain from like making it the obvious thing, but I thought like the imagery of the game's logo of like the skull with being like the timer with the cabin and the people underneath.
The hourglass, yeah, it's too strong.
It's a really strong image, right? And the image is for the game Until Dawn.
A fantastic game.
And it is a game where I have played the opening couple of hours, and then we ended up going in and playing the Quarry instead. And it wasn't due to anything. It was just like, oh, hey, well, the Quarry's just come out as we first played the first couple of hours of Until Dawn. Should we try out the new game, the Quarry? Because that has like a more integrated co-op system.
It's more robust in its systems, yeah. It's like, and it must be tough. I'm going to imagine it'd be tough to go back. So I've played Until Dawn, but not the Quarry.
Right, yeah. And that's the thing is, I got reminded about Until Dawn because there is a remaster coming out for Until Dawn very soon. And I will just check when the Until Dawn remaster is coming out.
Maybe we'll play it. Maybe if that gaming channel ever gets made, Luke, we can
Yeah,
play
I know,
it.
right? Thinking about things that we can potentially play.
Well, that'll be next year, right? That'll be next year for Halloween.
Oh shit! That's coming out in 2 days.
Yeah. Well, do you know what? We're not gonna.
Right.
In which case, we're not gonna play it. We'll have to wait till next year.
Well, I mean, I might end up playing it because no doubt my partner will get a code because I believe it's published by PlayStation.
There you go. Let's get used to the game, and then next year when the gaming channel's there, because we've got all the support that we need to create it.
And that's one thing that's great about Until Dawn, is because if you're unfamiliar, it's an interactive drama horror game developed by Supermassive Games, and yes, published by Sony Computer Entertainment, which is, the publishing branch of Sony, which is PlayStation.
It's also not the most interesting part of the wiki, so let's quickly move on from that.
Yeah.
I don't really care about who's the executive producer on the video game.
Oh no, it was more just I was curious because I was like, well, no doubt that means that we'll get a code and I'll probably end up playing it this October at some point to see how the move goes. But players assume control of 8 young adults who have to survive on Blackwood Mountain when their lives are threatened, and that's like kind of gimmick between both Until Dawn and The Quarry is that you're basically playing like almost kind of one of traditional slasher horror movies.
Yes,
but you're playing as the entire group of teens and swapping in and out.
So it's not like a Walking Dead where you play as one character and you influence the rest of the group. You're playing as the entire group at the same time, and you hot swap between them on occasion, like Lost Vikings style, which is. And the thing is, I'd say it's a unique idea, but I know it's not, because we talked previously, and it's the episode's going out this Saturday, about a game that actually did this concept earlier, and that game is Obscure.
Yeah,
that's more like action focused. Like it's not as narrative driven as Until Dawn.
And the game features a butterfly effect system in which players must make choices that change the story. It says
that's a fun system.
Yeah, and it does say all playable characters can survive or die depending on the choices made. So literally, out of all 8 people that you play as, anyone can survive or die.
Yes, and it's not clear at what point they can or can't die, but if you do a second playthrough, it's pretty obvious that like early decisions won't kill you. The early decisions are there to teach you the game's mechanics.
And kind of give you those little moments like a horror movie would, where it teases the people dying. Like you mentioned Final Destination, like how many times does Final Destination like give you the tease of the death and fake you out? Yeah.
But one of the things I like about Until Dawn is that because it is very much aware of a lot of horror movie tropes, it allows them to. And obviously, what's the number one thing people say in a horror movie when someone like puts down a knife, for example? It's like, don't put down the knife. Why are you putting down the knife?
Right.
In the game, you can do the thing of like when your character sees a knife, well, I'm picking that fucking knife up. And it'll say the thing, do you want to put down the knife? I'm using this as a generic example, and you'll say no. It's like, instead of knife, just think weapon. And you'll pick that up and you get a butterfly effect and you think, fuck yeah, I've now got a weapon. But then later in the game, that weapon's not there. Someone else might need it. And there's like a moment where someone's like reaching for a weapon and it's not there. Because you took it earlier in the game.
And so does it come up with a little like butterfly when you do things that affect the game, right?
And it'll punish, and that's the thing, that is so ingenious because it's punishing you for having meta awareness.
But like, it's interesting, right? Because, I mean, I very much tried to like role play, and me and my group of friends did. Of like, with The Quarry, it was, hey, here's these people, here's a couple of vague characteristics about each person, and then you had that scene at the start where they all kind of,
get to know each other.
Get to know each other a little bit, talk about one another, kind of basically introduce themselves as playable characters to the game. Like, and we all were kind of committed to, well, what would these characters act like in those roles?
Yes, or like, what would you do in this moment? Because I remember watching like a playthrough of the game because I was curious. Like after I did the classic, I played through the game. Let's watch someone else play through it. And one of the things that was hilarious is watching someone play through it. Is that we talked about Undertale, where people really love Undertale and they get mad when you don't make the optimum decision to get everyone to survive towards the end of the game.
Yeah.
You act just, as you would. People get annoyed. Like in the playthrough, every other comment is someone pissed off with them. Like, no, you did the wrong thing. Now your character's gonna die. It's like, surely, if you want to see someone do a perfect playthrough of the game, go watch that 8-hour video that just has all the cutscenes with the perfect decision made without commentary.
Yeah,
right? I'm always baffled by that response to stuff like that of people getting mad that you're not. They want you to do a blind playthrough, but also want you to do the exact perfect thing first time.
Yeah, and it's interesting because obviously it wasn't a blind playthrough or first playthrough for us, but we've been streaming the Mass Effect trilogy, on Mondays, and it was that moment where it was like Mass Effect 1 and Rex died, and it's like, well, I could reload the mission and try and figure out if we've got enough Paragon or Renegade to figure this out. But it's more interesting if Rex is now dead, right? If we just commit to what mistakes we make along the way.
Because every other playthrough in existence just has him survive, because their chat will bug them into doing a perfect playthrough. It's like Undertale. It's almost impossible to find a non-perf Paragon or genocide run out there, because people try to just do a regular run of the game, get bullied and harassed by the fan base into playing the way that they want.
And obviously,
in essence, robbing that person of the genuine experience of playing through the game for the first time.
And when we played through Undertale on your stream, I remember, you'd played the game a couple of times, right? But this was my first time experience Undertale. And you were like, look, we're just going to go for the optimum run because, the comments are just going to all spoil it anyway.
Yep.
And even though it was like, oh, this is Lucas's first time, he doesn't really know what's going on. I do, but Lucas doesn't be nice in chat. Immediately, everyone was just spoiling everything anyway.
Yep. And also, just every other comment from a new chatter is just you're doing you're doing the perfect run. You're doing the perfect run. You're doing a perfect run, right? You're doing a perfect run. Why are you not doing a perfect run? Why are you not picking up that item? Why are you not doing this? Ooh, I can't wait for you to see. It's like,
oh, you're doing genocide or pacifist, and it's like,
yeah, I get it. You're excited to see someone play the game that you like, but your enthusiasm for it is now, and presumably that enthusiasm is born out of you played through the game for the first time and were genuinely shocked by, in Undertale, for example, the twist at the end of oh no, this doesn't work like a regular RPG. You didn't have to kill anybody. And that twist was so exciting, but now you're robbing people of that by refusing to let them actually engage with the game as they would naturally and get to the conclusion that you did years ago.
Yeah,
same right. Until Dawn, of not letting people make bad decisions because you don't want to see the character you like die. It's well, surely that's what you want, right?
Maybe that's what we should do if we do end up doing some stream or something for this, or a gameplay, a Let's Play or whatever we do with Until Dawn or The Quarry or whatever. Maybe we should try and just min it instead of max it, of just get as many people killed as possible.
Well, that's boring as well, because that's the other. I'd rather just do an organic playthrough. I'm going to do what I would in this situation.
Yeah, and
mistakes and all.
I will say, obviously, as I say, The Quarry integrates it into the game a bit better. There's no reason why you can't do it with Until Dawn and I'm presuming when the remaster comes out, they'll have built it into the game. So
put some new
wait
systems
2 days as of the time this podcast comes out. But yeah, just the idea of getting a couple of people or a group of people or even 8 people, if you can commit to 8 people being around for a gaming session that's 20 hours long. So trying to get people to commit to a D&D campaign in it. Yeah. But yeah, it just, each person gets given a character or 2, and you are solely responsible for their life.
If you fuck up, that's on you.
And I think it's such a fun way to play these games.
Exactly, yeah. And it's a great way of including people who maybe aren't either familiar with the game, familiar with gaming as a genre.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you get someone in there who doesn't like horror movies. Get them to play. And during the spooky sections, they'll be making mistakes because they're scared. And what a great organic experience that would be.
Even if you don't necessarily, even if you want to bring a non-gamer into the group, you can be look, I'll play this character for you. I'll physically play the game, but you tell me what decisions to make.
Yep.
And yeah, it's a really fun way to get in. Or a different way to play the game, which can be very, differently handled, is everybody comes together to make every decision.
Because that can also be fun.
The game puts your decisions on a timer, people get super stressy. And it's no, like, do this. Like, no,
Would you know what they are? They're the people on, like, YouTube in the comments or on Twitch who know the correct way through the game and want you to do it their way. It's like, no, if you're playing Undertale, you need to do a pacifist run. No, you need to go talk to this character at this point to get this dialogue. Why? I like that dialogue. You're in the dialogue you already know exists? Cool, I don't care.
And I would love if we got better, like, integration into Twitch or YouTube live streaming, where you could get it to the point where have, like, an audience mode where you play Until Dawn, but the audience makes every decision and just see what happens.
It's like Jackbox does that, right? And you also had, like, Twitch Plays Pokemon.
Yes, so I'd love to see a Twitch Plays Pokemon-esque version of Until Dawn.
And Twitch Plays Pokemon was a fantastic example because you had this. Do we mention people who just ruin it for everybody else because you have to play it my way? Remember where you had, like, it was anarchy mode and democracy.
Yeah.
And the people who like wanted democracy were on, like, Reddit organizing to do the exact golden path through the game. And it's like, fuck you. I was always anarchy. I was always on board with anarchy.
Oh yeah, like, same, yeah.
100% it should be anarchy all the time. And the people who wanted democracy are fucking cowards.
I would adore having some kind of anarchy style system for Until Dawn on a playthrough of, like, well, whoever just gets the right timing on the input gets to make the decision.
Yep.
Just fuck it.
And you know that if that was, like, a big thing, you would have people like they did with Twitch Plays Pokemon, where they outside of the game organized so they could go in and figure out the correct path through the game. And it's like, so boring. Not embrace anarchy.
And one thing I do want to do, because it talks about, like, some of the inspiration that the game
loads, right? Tell me the inspirations. I imagine, I'm going to guess one of the first ones is, like, stuff like I Know What You Did Last Summer.
It doesn't mention that. It mentions 2 movies and 3 video games that the team took inspiration from. They're all named here. I'm sure that this is an amalgamation of 1,000 different things that an entire team of people took inspiration from, right?
So what are the 2 movies then?
So the 2 movies include Evil Dead.
I was going to say Scream.
2. Well, you said let me know and then asked for.
No, I was just going to guess. I'm guessing it's Scream because the game is quite self-referential. Is Scream one?
No, it's not. No.
Oh.
So one of the movies I mentioned, Evil Dead 2, and can you mention can you think of the other one?
Well, in my head, it's very similar to stuff like I said, Scream. It's very self-referential. Even though actually the characters don't reference the tropes, but the game itself is aware of them and plays on them.
I'm gonna say you're going very much down the wrong route.
Okay, so is it, like, actually a genuine horror movie then?
Yes.
Actually, as well, I mentioned I was ill earlier. I need a cough. 1 sec.
Of course, yeah. So you're going down, like, you need to go down the route of, like, actual horror film.
Okay, so a horror movie that's Blair Witch Project?
Earlier.
Like Lost in the Woods?
Nope. It's a movie that I haven't seen, but I'm aware of via pop culture osmosis of Poltergeist.
I can see that, but, like...
Hey, okay, yeah, I'm not saying that it's the closest thing, it's just this is one of the main inspirations mentioned on the wiki.
Well, here's the thing, it's just that the game references so many fucking things. I wouldn't mention Poltergeist as a specific thing. Like I said, I Know What You Did Last Summer to me is a much clearer reference because it's a bunch of friends who all have a dark secret and then are then haunted by said secret when they all meet back up. It's like the start of the game is like it's not much of a spoiler. It's the impetus to the plot is just characters get pranked. The prank goes wrong. Characters disappear into the woods.
Yeah,
that's a very. I just think I Know What You Did Last Summer and movies of its ilk are a much clearer line that I can see.
Yeah,
reference wise. And
there's 2 very obvious video game that, like, it's taking inspiration from.
Is one obscure? That'd be great,
I don't think Obscure has ever been listed as an inspiration for another video game.
No, so I'm gonna guess like Walking Dead, just as like the play style.
No, the play style is
Heavy Rain.
The playstyle is inspired by Heavy Rain, of course.
For sake. Of course it is.
And then it mentions just 2 other horror video games.
Silent Hill.
And
Resident Evil.
Yeah, there we go.
It's always those 2, right?
Yeah.
Like, with movies, there's like so many thousands of like horror movies, and like in terms of iconicness, there's still so many iconic ones. But with horror games, there's the 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not. I don't even think I get points for that. I guess.
No, that's the thing is, I was like, you know what these video games are going to be, but yeah, I'm sure, as I say, there's many other inspirations that the team took from, but those are the 5 that it mentions here specifically. Yeah. So I'm sure those are things that have maybe been specifically mentioned in interviews by the team or something like that.
I just don't see the Evil Dead influence. Like, I can see like there's references to the Evil Dead, but tone-wise, Evil Dead is about a guy in his 30s with a shotgun for a hand.
Yeah.
There's what like 5,000 other bunch of teens get murdered in the woods movies.
And slashers fighting, like hunting down teens and things like that. I don't know where that Evil Dead 2 specifically comes from.
Maybe the tone, because it does have quite a comedic tone. But even then, Scream is a slasher horror movie that hangs a lampshade on specific tropes within the teen horror slasher genre.
I know.
And even in the teen slasher genre, you have stuff like The Faculty, which we mentioned in the Obscure video, which I went and tracked down and I watched. And it's like, that is also quite self-referential. Like, it's aware of all the tropes of the genre.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also got quite a weirdly stacked cast, because I looked at it and went, oh, Elijah Wood and like Robert Patrick are in this.
Oh, right.
Elijah Wood getting hunted down by the T-1000 or whatever. Tell me more about Until Dawn.
Well, talking about a stacked cast.
Yeah, it does have a pretty good cast, yeah. But it's more stacked in the sense that I don't think, was Rami Malek a big deal at the time? He wasn't in Mr. Robot yet, right?
I vaguely remember Rami Malek. Yeah, Rami Malek had just started Mr. Robot around the time this was coming out.
Okay, and that's how they got him, because he was quite cheap, because Mr. Robot is kind of what put him on the map. And then before that, he was in Night at the Museum.
Oh, was he, right?
Yeah, he was like Ramses the Third or something like that.
Okay.
It's where you get one of those like all-time fantastic, just like balls exposed on stream moments where someone tried to cancel him, of like, well, why is Rami Malek playing like this Egyptian guy? And it's like, Rami Malek is Egyptian.
And like Rami Malek's the first person listed here, and the game released in 2015 when around the time Mr. Robot was like just up and coming. That started in 2015 as well, but the decision to cast him would have been probably a couple of years prior to that, right?
Yes. And it's also Hayden Panettiere, right? I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly.
That is not how you pronounce the name, but
how do you pronounce the name? Go
on. It's Hayden Panettiere.
Panettiere, okay.
As far as I'm aware.
From Heroes?
From Heroes, yes. Noted Heroes fame. Save the cheerleaders, save the world. And maybe they could have saved Heroes after season 1, but, you know, the writer's strike and all that.
Yeah, nothing could save it from that writer's strike. They literally left a character in the future and never went back and got him. They had a character, and the thing is, though, when you've got a series as a character has fucking time travel powers, I feel it'd be really easy to wreck on a shit season, and they never did. They just doubled down on the mistakes. It's like, you've got a character who has time travel. Just go back in time and start again. Just retcon, and I think they tried to do that, and that's how someone got left in the future.
Oh, man.
Whatever, that's a story for another day.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to cover Heroes at one point, because talk about from fucking hero to zero, that show.
What a waste of potential. Although, again, pretty stacked cast. There's a few actors on that who got their big break, thanks to, like our friend, Hayden Panettiere. I'm going to mispronounce
yes,
I'm going to mispronounce. I can't say it unless it's in front of me. It's just the last name I'm not too familiar with.
No, it is quite a difficult one to say, but then you got Megan Jet Martin, who it says here she is best known for her starring role in ABC family television series 10 Things I Hate About You as Bianca Stratford, which I'm unfamiliar with.
Yeah, no, I don't know that one. I know the film, because the film's great.
And okay, she's also well known as Tess Tyler in Camp Rock. But yeah,
that's a Disney thing that I didn't watch.
Yeah, we have Brett Dalton, who it makes note that he is in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yes, he is Mike, right?
Grant Ward.
No, but
Hive.
he plays Mike in the game.
Oh, I'm not sure about the characters' names in the game. Yeah.
Yeah, well, like Grant Ward, I recognised him. He's a pretty decent actor, and he was in that show for a long time. So you know what? He got paid. Good for him.
We've got Jordan William Fisher, who has recurring roles including The Secret Life of the American Teenager and Liv and Maddie. And I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nicole Sakura, who I do recognize from Superstore, and she was also in The American Shameless. And then Peter Stormare.
Oh yes, Peter Stormare. Like, he's just like such a good actor.
He's
Peter
definitely
Stormare.
not the same age as the rest of them, though.
No, he's like he has a different role.
Is he in Prison Break?
He's in Prison Break.
Yeah, I thought I just saw the likes. I've just literally started watching some Prison Break.
He's a Brutesy in Prison Break.
Yeah. It came up with the little thing. I was like, he's in Prison Break, right? Yeah.
The thing is, well, whenever you see Peter Stormare, he's like one of those actors where he shows up and you're like, it's Peter Stormare. You know you're in for a good time when Peter Stormare rocks up.
But yeah, obviously he was not one of the teens. He is maybe like an antagonistic force in the game.
He's like the wraparound.
Sorry, what?
Like the context of a story is people talking to him.
Oh, okay.
They're recounting the events of a story to him.
Right.
Okay. So he's like in between scenes, they'll like fade out to Peter Stormare, and you're like, you don't know which person you're playing as.
Mm-hmm.
Like talking to Peter Stormare, recounting the events of the story.
And I do love the fact that like apparently Until Dawn was first planned as a first-person game for PS3's motion controller PlayStation Move.
And it died on its fucking ass, and thank God.
Yeah, and obviously then it became a PlayStation 4 game when that PlayStation Move like didn't quite hit the same strands as like the Wii did. Yeah, it's like that's the thing. The PlayStation Move is less notable than the fucking Kinect is.
Yeah, it's bad. But it does include some move aspects. Like, for example, there's some parts where, like, your character is hiding from something. You have to stay still. And it's like, keep the controller still.
Yeah, because
if the controller moves,
gyro controls from the PS4, like, DualShock 4 still in there, right? But, like...
Yep, and if you shake, or, like, if you hand it to someone who's not familiar with video games, and they get scared in that moment for the jump scare, the character moved.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I like that. That's a cool way of integrating that system without it feeling too obtuse.
Yes, I think that's a nice way to like put something in that actually fits the like genre.
Yeah,
quite well, and it's an interesting way to do it. Right, it's not something I've really seen put in other games.
No, and it's just an elegant way to just make that system feel more. Just what's the word now? Not inclusive, but more. There's a word for it. It feels.
You've now made me forget the word. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
It makes it feel more.
There. Yeah.
There's a word that describes it.
We're right there. It's on the tip of our brain.
It is fine. Just move on. It's fine.
But
someone correct us.
It is a shame though, because this remaster, Karl, if all those patents of like the PlayStation 5 is gonna know how sweaty you are and all this.
Oh, imagine that. It's actually secretly in your control when they release an update, and it's like your controller just gets.
Because that was the thing where apparently they had like either tested or just had patents for like a PlayStation controller that can sense how sweaty you are and your heartbeat and things.
Yeah, that's get rid of that though when they bought Call of Duty.
That's Xbox, but yeah, sure.
Whatever. It was a joke. I swing and a miss. So I was just thinking, what game has a sweaty player base? And I went Call of Duty, swing. My brain just like threw the ball at me. I just fucking swung.
But yeah, it would have been implemented quite well for this game because apparently to ensure the game was scary, the team used a galvanic skin response test to measure playtesters' fear levels while playing it.
Which is a good way of doing it. I like when they do stuff like that to ensure that something is... It's basically focus testing for horror.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm a huge... That's one of the reasons I really love horror as a genre, because it's so experimental, both in terms of the tone you can strike and the content you can include within the media, but also the ways it's advertised, the ways it gets brainstormed, the ways it gets created in a lot of cases. Like, for example, Evil Dead. That's one of the things that I don't really... For Evil Dead, Sam Raimi is known for having really interesting, in some cases, unique and influential camera movements.
Yeah.
Like, for example, like, sometimes, there's a monster's coming towards Ash. How do they represent that? Have the camera fly towards his face.
Yeah.
There's not really a lot of that in Until Dawn. There's some aspects, like sometimes when you got a view from like the monster or the antagonistic force, sometimes the camera moves like quite erratically, but not as wildly as it does in Evil Dead. Because if it did, it'd be impossible to see what's going on, which is kind of the point with Evil Dead. It's supposed to make you feel as like on edge as Ash is when just like, oh, the entire room just shits the bed. So the camera starts flying in every fucking direction.
I would say that like it might be a technical limitation kind of thing, camera wise. I'm not sure.
I think it just make the game impossible.
It might just be it might just be quality of life thing of like it would just be awful to play if the camera was all over the shop, right?
What's when you're watching a film, all you need to do is just you follow the action with your eyes, right? Yeah. When you're controlling with your controller, that's like two separate things you got to keep in mind. It's just it'd be disorientating to the average person, I feel.
Because like obviously it's a very different kind of game, but say for example like just a limitation on a different level, different type of game entirely. Don't know why my brain went to this example, but when it was Spider-Man on the PS4, and it was like the character and the camera can only move at this certain max speed because the game can't technically load more of the world fast enough. So like the camera at some point can't move any faster than this because we can't load the world fast enough to render it out.
Yeah,
and like it's a much different kind of game that's a lot smaller scope and more detailed in all of its environments. And again, like I don't know just if there's some kind of technical limitation on like spinning and slamming a camera around everywhere super fast in a game to like maybe it would just kind of make the game have to render too many things so quickly. I don't know.
Maybe, and that's the thing, but that's a hallmark of Sam Raimi's movies. And that's why I'm still hung up on the fact they cite it as an influence, because it doesn't even. When I think Evil Dead, I think that the Deadites, the tone, and then the camera work, and almost none of those are present in the actual final product.
Well, it does have a few more examples.
Until Dawn. Okay, go.
Because it says, Biles, who I presume was like the director here. Let me
presumably
double check quick. Yeah, directors Will Biles and Nick Bowen. But it says here that Biles described the game as glib and cheesy, said the story and atmosphere were similar to a typical teen horror movie, and the film was inspired by a number of classic movies. The developers observed horror tropes and cliches that can be subverted in the game, and these films included Psycho, The Haunting, The Exorcist, Halloween, Poltergeist, Evil Dead 2, and The Conjuring. And again, I get that it's taking tropes and cliches from that, but none of them are like the typical teen slasher films that I would think of.
Although they do get reference, I don't want to do too many spoilers, but there's like there's a lot of fake outs in the game, and a lot of the fake outs are reminiscent of older classic horror tropes. But I would say I wouldn't say they're the main influence for the game. They're just things that are getting referenced to, like, flex the creators' just film knowledge and chops.
Yeah, sure.
Again, I would say a much better and more accurate reference and would be teen slashers. None of which were mentioned there. And all the stuff that they're referencing does get referenced, but it's like kind of a red herring.
And maybe that's what it's talking about, just more talking about the tropes and cliches of those kinds of films.
Fair.
But it says that they wrote a script of nearly 10,000 pages. 10,000 pages. That's a lot of pages, Karl.
It's quite a few.
I know.
So imagine, like this. I've got a piece of paper here. It's got like detail. It's got bank details on it. Right. So imagine this piece of paper. And there's 1,000 of these, and then 10 more.
That's how numbers work. Yes. Yeah.
That's a lot.
But yeah, this is how those kind of scripts must work, right? Is because you've got 8 different playable characters set across a game that's like, as I say, anywhere between like 12 and 20 hours as far as I've seen people talk about.
Yeah, there's a lot of like optional dialogue. There's different paths through the game. There's
each person can die at a different points
any
or be
point.
surviving all the way to the end. You've got to have different scripts depending on who is and isn't alive. Yeah, it must be a technical nightmare trying to write one of those. And I know that, in fact, I was listening to a podcast not long ago with Gary Witter on it. He was talking about his experience of writing The Walking Dead Season 1 and being a contributor on that.
Must have been a ball ache, right?
And he was just like, I helped write, I think he said a chapter or two on that first season of Walking Dead. And he was like, I'm never touching a game like that again because the amount of different scenarios and possibilities that you're right for was just a fucking minefield.
Also, as well, the essence of one of those games or a game that utilizes a system like that is how much redundancy can you account for?
Mm-hmm.
And like a good example, it's a much smaller example, but I think of Mortal Kombat. Jerry has like the introductions in Mortal Kombat, and every character has like 20 different interactions with every other character. If you watch a compilation of those, you'll notice that a lot of the lines get repeated because they write lines for characters that can be utilized in different situations and scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Like Scorpion saying, like, like I will win this fight this day. He can say that to multiple different characters in response to multiple different prompts. And I imagine it's the same thing of like there must be a skill to writing dialogue that could be used in a scenario in multiple different instances of the game that might exist. Because that just if this character can say this line and it works for 80% of the different scenarios that could possibly exist at this point in the game with all the different variations, that's a good line. So we only record that shit once.
Yeah, because of course you want to record unique lines in that scenario of Mortal Kombat for like Scorpion versus Sub-Zero. You want to have a unique line there,
and you want a unique line for everyone.
Against fucking Sector, like, does it really matter?
Yeah, or when you introduce like DLC in that game of like, okay, we brought in a new DLC character, and so of course we're going to record new lines for it, but how many of those older lines can fit? So we can just like create what is ostensibly a new conversation. There's new instance that might exist, but we reuse it. It's just clever reuse of an asset.
Does Scorpion really need to have a unique line for fighting Homelander?
Well, he does, but he doesn't. But also at the same time, some of his non-unique lines can be used against Homelander but then you have to write the Homelander dialogue to specifically set up for the 18 other characters as generic dialogue. And again, it's a skill, and I imagine it must be an absolute fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
But it must be worth it because the time of a writer is worth a lot less than the time of a voice actor, and it's worth a lot less than a voice actor who's a celebrity. So you go sit there and you figure it the fuck out, because when we bring the voice actor and got for a day.
And that's why at the time it was a lot of people that were maybe slightly recognizable. I think at the time, out of all of the teams, the only real one that most people were aware of was Hayden Panettiere. Hayden Panettiere from Heroes.
He's catching. And even she'd not been in a lot. Like, she'd not been anything big in a while. I imagine she was
known as the one from Heroes, but Heroes fell off a fucking cliff.
Yeah, that was like a few years prior. But I imagine it's a thing they do a lot with horror. Of a general rule of thumb with horror is one of the reasons I like it as a genre is it's also generally a really good showcase of new talent, both behind and in front of the camera. Because if you pay someone, if you get like a Brad Pitt in and you put him in a horror movie, Brad Pitt's not going to fucking die.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to kill off Brad Pitt. Alternately, also, Brad Pitt is not going to let himself get horribly murdered on screen. So you'll go get someone cheap, someone new, someone unknown, and as a result, a lot of actors actually get their start in stuff like that. Same with like James Cameron. James Cameron started his career working on shitty horror movies because they're such cheap productions. They have to get cheap labor and cheap actors, and some of those people end up going to better things.
Yeah, he was very skilled at being able to basically make anything that you wanted him to make for your movie. But yeah, his start was on like figuring out how to solve problems for shitty low budget horror movies.
Peter Jackson, what's he known for? Lord of the fucking Rings, one of the literally the biggest movies in the world. 11 Oscars. He's got his start making low budget horror movies.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Raimi, maker of Spider-Man 2, winner of 83 Oscars.
Yeah. Got his start with Evil Dead.
Yeah.
Making movies with his mate, Bruce Campbell. in his back garden.
That's basically all he's still doing now, isn't it?
Much,
he's still just making films with his mate Bruce Campbell.
But that's how he cut his teeth. Same for like a lot of actors as well. There's a lot of actors, if you look back at their early career, they probably got their start in a horror movie. Because horror movies, it's going to be a shit production and you're going to die for it, but you get 5 minutes for your reel.
Yeah, exactly. And it does say that these playable characters were set up as typical horror movie archetypes, but then as the narrative unfolded, the characters show more nuanced qualities because the writers felt like, unlike films, games have time for quieter moments for characters to, develop and express their inner feelings.
Yep, and you get there's a lot of smaller moments you might not see if you try to bum rush your way through the game. You also get just some iconic moments like you need to understand. It's like, understand the palm of my hand, bitch. Which is a great line. Or like Rami Malek coming in when he's playing like the drunken party bro and he's like, let's party like porn stars, dude. And just like with a bottle of Jack in his hand, it's like, I know that dipshit.
And I love this part of the explanation here. It says, with the game's emphasis on players' choices, players can no longer laugh at the characters' decisions because they must make these decisions themselves.
Exactly. It's like when you're in a horror movie and it's like, why? Joy the villain. And it's like, oh no, the villain's on the floor. And then the character leaves. And it's like, no, shoot him again.
Yeah.
You have the option to. And I'm not saying this is the thing that happens in the game. I'm saying it's a
You're
situation
making up a generic scenario, yes.
A situation akin to that will happen and you can make that choice. But because the people making the game are aware that that's a trope, maybe you'll be tricked. Maybe that's the bad choice, and maybe they're going to punish you for doing the thing that everyone says you should do in a horror movie. Or maybe it's the right choice. You don't know. And that's kind of the fun of playing Until Dawn of. The more you're aware of these tropes, the more you find yourself second-guessing whether or not you should go against them. It's like, well, are they going to... They must obviously know about his tropes, they put it in. But am I going to get punished for knowing about the trope?
Yeah, exactly.
Or do they want me to go against the trope? But if I go against the trope, it's like, then you find yourself second guessing yourself and your character dies.
It's those mind games, isn't it? Of like the bluff, the double bluff, the triple bluff, and you just go back and forth in your head.
Yeah, the no mix up. And that's why it's so fun.
And it does mention here as well that the dialogue was reduced significantly when the team began to use motion capture technology, which facilitates storytelling through acting. And it's just, we can't do 10,000 pages worth of a script because we are motion capturing all 10,000 pages.
Yeah, which means they motion captured that slap. That slap of an absolute god, just to understand the palm of my hand.
And as somebody
it's such a good slap.
As somebody that has completed the game, Karl.
Yes.
We'll just end here, and I don't know whether this makes much sense to you.
Okay,
or like depending on how much you remember the game, because it just says the story was written in a non-linear fashion. Chapter 8 was the first to be completed, which ended up causing some inconsistencies in the story.
I'm not sure. Well, I don't remember the specific chapters, but if you've got an example, is it the last chapter?
That's all it says.
Okay.
Maybe I'll just do a quick chapter check for Until Dawn.
If it's the last chapter, I can see why, but I don't remember the specific order. I remember what happens in the game, I just don't remember what happens in chapter 8 because I don't know what chapter 8 is.
So yeah, because I wonder how many chapters there are. It looks like there's 10 chapters. So that's when through the game, that's as the game is starting to ramp up towards the end, but isn't the end.
Yeah, okay, that's when a couple of twists happen. So I can see why that would cause issues if you're writing backwards, but also I can see why the classic thing is, I wrote myself into a corner.
Yeah,
I can see themselves writing themselves into a corner because they want, thinking that twist is so good, then thinking, okay, now we've got to go back and we've got to retroactively build up to that twist because it's a solid experience. But I'm trying to speak vaguely.
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll leave it there because we need to get onto your wiki at some point. I know I talked a bit too much at the start about Zelda and just wanted to rant about that for a minute, but yeah,
gaming channel.
Do it. Let's play Until Dawn, let's play The Quarry. One thing I mentioned earlier that I wanted to talk about was just, I really want to do a playthrough of Heavy Rain, but just not doing any input.
The fail through.
Just the fail through of Heavy Rain to see how much the game lets you fuck it up.
I believe you'd need to go track down the PS3 version then.
Why?
Because they changed Joe, and I think this is because David Cage is like a weirdo. Like he thinks he's an auteur and he doesn't like being made fun of. But you know that classic video of like the fail through of like the fight in the supermarket?
The chase scene, yeah.
Yes. It's like if you know anything about this game, you know that scene. David Cage fucking hates that scene. And in like the remaster of Heavy Rain, if you try and do a fail through for that moment, the fight it ends early. They mocap new stuff to show the chase ending early because like they didn't want people doing that. So if you try and do a fail through in the remastered version, it doesn't work and scenes end early because David Cage didn't like that people were laughing at his creation.
So that pisses
track
me
down
off.
the PS3 version because the PS3 version has all of those things still in it.
Right, that may be a case of like seeing how easily that can be emulated or
Dig
something.
Out the PS3, yeah.
Well, the PS3 is like really weird about capturing from.
It is indeed. You know what? That's a problem for next year, or maybe this year. Hey, we don't know how many people love this channel. Exactly, there should be a problem for next week, Lucas.
No. But I still do have a PS3 sitting like right behind me.
It's waiting.
I think I have a copy of Heavy Rain packed away somewhere.
So when do you want to play Raging Blast 2 again? It's like Sparking Zero comes out now. You can rest.
I know, yeah.
Raging Blast 2 can rest.
But yeah, like that's the thing, right? It's just if people want to see us do all this kind of shit, then when I'm moved and we sort out new things, yeah, we're aiming to have a stretch goal, at very least a stretch goal for a gamer channel, or game streams or something gaming related.
That,
again, this is all to be decided. Donate to TBD, as Arrested Development would say.
Yes.
Oh no, we really need to raise more money for TBD. Oh dear, but yeah. I guess I just need to take a quick break for a couple of minutes. I'll run and grab another drink. And oh no, we're covering up ourselves.
It's Ace. Where's Ace? Where's the ginormous Ace?
Yeah, I need to just set that up. So Karl, maybe just give us a little tease of what you got while I sort this out.
Well, I've got one of the scariest books I've ever read because I got like 100 pages into it and I'm like, fuck, this is the biggest piece of shit I've ever read. And yet, some people out there make it their entire goddamn personality. And that's terrifying. That people make their entire personality a bad book. Let's see if people can guess what it is, because that's the thing. But from that description, I was like Ready Player One, so now we covered that already.
Yeah, we did, yeah. I need to figure out where I've put things.
Save the picture of Ace.
Hard drive. No, I'm looking for background music. I can't remember where I put the background music now.
Oh no.
Ah, here it is.
There we go. Perfect. I like as well someone immediately put Ready Player One. It's like, nope.
Yeah. Just straight away, it's like, shit book. Like, well,
shit
must
book.
be Ready Player One then.
Yeah. Sure. Will I return?
I'll put up this picture now, and you can let me deal with this.
Okay. I'll mute myself on my end, my friend, and go grab myself another beverage.
All the blurry cats coming in. So yeah, we'll take a quick break now and be back in just a few moments. Enjoy Ace while we take a break. Just blurry Ace. Oh, there we go.
Back, baby. Well, I hope so, anyway.
Yeah. No, we are. Oh, I need to stop this music playing now, though.
Never stop the music, Lucas. How dare you stop the party?
It was a very chill party, if it was a party.
Or was it like lo-fi hip-hop beats or something?
Well, it's just the background music that we use for the Wiki Weekends videos, so it is pretty lo-fi chill.
Deliberately picked so it's not distracting, unlike Two Finger Johnny, which was, fun fact.
And I am I'm just chomping on a pear drop.
Okay, so I guess while you do that, should I do some housekeeping?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's some housekeeping. There's not really much to say because Lucas is moving, so he's not doing any streams or anything. I'm not feeling very well, so I'm probably like, making any more content, say for this, for a while. But if people have been following on social media my journey of dealing with my landlord, the How Not to Do Business on Landlords, which features the whole story, is now available over on FactFeed, so you can go check that out. Also, just a little addendum. There's a sponsor on that video, and we can't really say it too loudly, like in public, but this is probably distance enough away from FactFeed and like my socials to say so. Like, myself and Lucas get a cut every time someone in America clicks and follows the link. So if the product and service described in that sponsor spot sounds like something you genuinely need, just we get a cut if you click that link.
If you sign up for the free trial, right?
Yeah. And a cut of our cut goes to a charity. Just a pro tip. So if anyone out there is like, hey, how do we support FactFeed or anything like that? That's a good way of doing it. But that's the only thing I'd like to plug because, like I said, I'm not feeling very well. I think after this I'm going to go collapse. So.
Well, then, in that case, we best make the best use of Karl while we've got him.
We're gonna boogie on, right? Okay, so Lucas today. Okay, so I thought, it's spooky month. Let's talk about something scary, as I mentioned. The criteria I had is it's very scary. Not in the sense that the book itself is scary. It's more that the response to the book is scary. Because people actually take it seriously. And the book is Atlas Shrugged. And how familiar are you with Atlas Shrugged, Lucas?
I think I've heard of it, maybe.
You've no doubt heard of Atlas Shrugged, yes. But that's the beauty of Wiki Weekends. If you're not familiar with something, Wikipedia is right here for it. I was going to say the Wiki. It's like, well, it is the Wiki. It's like the Wiki, Wikipedia. So Atlas Shrugged is a 1957 novel by Ayn Rand. And I'll just say, I'm not really sure how you pronounce. I've heard it pronounced Ayn Rand, but it's A-Y-N. So some people say Ayn Rand. I'm just going to say Ayn Rand. It is her longest novel, the fourth and final one published during her lifetime, and she considered it to be her magnum opus. Oh no, sorry. It's it's her magnum opus, which means she didn't think too highly of herself. And Lucas, you said earlier, like the initial script for Until Dawn was 10,000 pages long. So I have read 100 pages of Atlas Shrugged and was like, fuck this, it sucks. The actual final novel is 1,100 pages.
1,100, not 11,000.
1,100 pages. Close to 1,200. And just for like comparison's sake, do you want to just double check how long is Lord of the Rings? Just check how many pages like Lord of the Rings is like.
Lord of the Rings, the trilogy.
Just, I guess, like one of them. Like page count wise. Because I'm not sure like how to I want to help people visualize how long this book actually is.
So The Lord of the Rings. Here, I'm presuming that is that the first one? Or is that all?
You have different names, right, depending on what you've got.
Yeah, right. Is like the first one that comes up is a paperback edition that's 1178 pages. So 1,178 pages.
Which is 10 pages shorter than 10 pages longer than Atlas Shrugged. Keep in mind,
The Lord of the Rings on Wikipedia is listed at 1,077.
Okay, so it's like, it's close to the length of Lord of the Rings. And keep in mind, like, how much world building and effort Tolkien put into crafting his universe. That's like what Ayn Rand's just libertarian wank fantasy is, which is not how Wikipedia describes it. Wikipedia describes it as... Well, actually, no, Wikipedia is quoting her describing it. So she described the theme of Atlas Shrugged as, and I quote, the role of man's mind in existence, and it includes elements of science fiction, mystery, and romance. The book explores a number of philosophical themes from which Rand would subsequently develop objectivism, Sorry. The book explores a number of philosophical themes from which Rand would subsequently develop her own philosophy of objectivism, including reason, property rights, individualism, libertarianism, and capitalism. So, Lucas, how familiar are you? Because this is basically just the Libertarian Manifesto. And how familiar are you with the concept of libertarianism? And I'm not going to be taking it seriously because it is a wholly unserious worldview.
Yeah, I don't know too much about libertarianism as a concept.
Basically, the way it's described is libertarians are like house cats. They are fiercely convinced of their own independence whilst being wholly reliant on systems they do not understand. So libertarians as a whole don't like things like public spending. To the point where some libertarians don't like the idea of things like roads.
Yeah, I was about to say, what about just basic infrastructure like roads?
No, Lucas, they should all be decided upon by the free market. And there are libertarians who genuinely think that all infrastructure should be created by corporations and should be profit driven because they think that if it was profit driven, it'd be more efficient. And I'd like to say, like, you try playing PlayStation recently, PlayStation Network. Does that shit fucking run?
I mean, look at just who in recent times has tried to make private corporate owned roads and did it go well?
No. And that's why I say it's a wholly unserious worldview. But the book features, or it depicts, a dystopian United States in which publicly traded companies suffer under increasingly burdensome laws and regulations. Lucas, those pesky laws and regulations, that's the other thing libertarians don't like. They don't like things like OSHA. So you know, like the shit that says, hey, you've got to wear hard hats on building sites.
Right,
they hate that. Because, Lucas, that's the government telling you what to do.
Yeah,
they also hate things like the FDA. Because, hey, don't put additives in food. How dare you tell me what I'm allowed to put in my food?
It's like, no, it's just trying to come up with basic laws and rules around corporations trying to...
Lucas, fuck you.
Like, because if corporations can spend even less money
Lucas, fuck you.
to make you even less safe to make more profit,
Lucas,
they will.
No. And it's basically it's people who don't understand that. They don't understand scale. It's like they believe that the individual rights that are inherent and should be, just assumed for all people, like, the right to love and live the way that you choose. They think that should apply to corporations. And it just doesn't work that way, because when you scale up to that, to thousands, millions of people, you can't have the ethics and rules of an individual, because it'd be ironically so burdensome. It'd be ridiculous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you just, it's like, Lucas, if you want to build like a road, if you just lived in your house and you had to get a road to your local shop and you had to build your road and then you didn't let anyone else use your road, you just result in like 8,000 roads. At some point, you just make sense of those 8,000 people all pay into one pot and we'll build a road out of that.
And we'll make it a good road.
No, but Lucas, they hate that.
And I will say that one thing that really, gets me is the idea that, especially when you own your own land, being told that you can't do certain things on your own land and on your own property.
And that's why it's such an attractive philosophy to a lot of people, because some elements of it do make sense. Like, hey, why can the government tell you what to do with land that you own? And usually there's a reason of, for example, what was the example you're going to use?
Well, it's like examples where the ones I agree with are like when people start making tunnel systems under their houses. And it's like, no, because that's probably going to not be properly built, and therefore that's going to cause structural problems for not just your house. That's going to cause sinkholes and shit. But when it's like, well, I wasn't allowed to build a shed in my back garden.
Yeah, and to a degree, that does make sense, right? It's like, hey, it's mine. It's like, but then you think of a common example in the UK is people not getting planning permission to build sheds. But then you go look at the actual shed and they've built basically a second house in their back garden. It's like, you need planning permission for that.
Yeah, but it's when people build a shed and they're like, you didn't get planning permission for this. It's like, it's just a fucking shed to put my shit in my garden in. It's like, I agree, when you're building a second house in your back garden, you shouldn't be able to just get away with it. But when it's like, no, you didn't apply for planning permission to put a fucking shed in your back garden.
And here's the thing, Lucas. A lot of those rules that they complain about are actually very reasonable. It's only when you try to be unreasonable with them. For example, like you are able to, you'll probably see it like in the UK, it's quite common, like, oh, the council stopped me from building a wall. And when you look at their wall and it's like this fucking slapdash job that like their cousin did. And it's like, well, why can the council tell me that my wall's too tall? And then you look and they've got a house on the corner of a road. And it's like, well, now cars can't see. Now it's a blind corner and that's dangerous for everybody else. It's like, your property, you can do what the fuck you want on it. But now what you've done on your property is impeding other people's ability to be safe.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's like, we had it one time where it was like rough because during summer, both me and my partner ended up having surgeries roughly around the same time.
Yeah.
And that limited us and our ability to do, like, especially garden work and shit like this.
Yes.
And it got to the point where we got a letter from the council, like, you've got a big hedge, trim your fucking hedge, because now people can't safely walk on the pavement. They're, like, getting pushed onto the road walking past your house. And it's like, eventually, you know, one of my family members came and helped us with it. And it sucks that the timing was just, we were physically incapable. But I also understand, like, the moment it goes from property that you're on to impeding on other people, like, I get that that's where the line should be drawn.
It's basically how all rights work. You have your like inherent rights immutable and cannot be challenged until the point they start to impede on the rights of others. Like, for example, freedom of speech. Like, I have the freedom to say whatever I want to, but if the speech that I'm saying starts to impact other people, for example, not even something offensive, but if me and you have a conversation in the middle of a public street, there is absolutely no law against me doing that. If I start screaming through a megaphone and you stand like 500 yards down the road and start responding to me, then someone could probably come up and say, can you stop doing that?
Mm-hmm.
You're disturbing the peace. And realistically, if you want to be a dick and you want to be really, really do that thing people on the internet do, you could frame that as the exact same thing. And you could frame that as, oh, they're impeding my freedom of speech. And they're being like, just incredible, what's the word now? Authoritarian in it. It's like, if you want to read it in the most uncharitable way possible, but also me screaming down the street is affecting other people's ability to walk down the street and enjoy the same freedoms that I do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think of like, oh, you can dress however you want. It's like, yeah, but if I go down, if I decide to wear a 5-foot wide hat and get on a train, right, and I'm entitled to a seat on the train that I paid for, but I'm not entitled to the space in the seats next to me, sort of thing, right?
Yeah, for sure. And
but they hate that. They hate all these rules, and they think that it should just be, hey, if I want to go onto a train and lie across 5 seats and shit myself, I should be able to do that.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? It's like, again, I do kind of, as you say, that's where they get you in, right? Is that a law of like, well, this guy wasn't allowed to put a duck pond in his back garden. Yeah. Isn't this insanity? And it's like, yeah, you should probably be able to put a duck pond in his garden, right? And then they start bringing you in and then escalating it. And then it turns into, well, he should actually be able to build a moat around the entire fucking street if he wants to. It's like, no.
And then fill it with crocodiles and shoot people who walk into his property. It's like the Ron Swanson thing, isn't it? Where he's got his workshop and the guy, Mark, goes in and he's like, well, you've got rags that are oily next to an open flame. And Ron's like, well, you know, it's my God-given right as an American to do this. And then you think, well, it is, but at the same time, if your place burns down, the place next door could burn down. And that's through no fault of their own. They are now at risk because you refuse to follow what are very basic safety rules. It's not infringing on your rights to tell you. Technically, it is, but at the same time, like, just don't fucking put open flames next to oily rags. If that's where you want to draw the line at what you should be able to do as an American, sure. But if someone's house burned down and your house caught on fire, you'd be mad at that person, right? Exactly, yeah. Well, just put yourself in there, but you can't. And that's it's an inherently selfish worldview.
It's just, we're boiling it down to very simple parts here, but essentially just wanting to be so selfish and put yourself so far ahead among anyone else to the detriment of a community around you, right?
That's the hallmark of libertarianism. So the book depicts, as mentioned, a dystopian United States in which publicly traded companies have suffered under burdensome laws and the fact they don't like regulations. Railroad executive Dagny Taggart and her lover, steel magnate Hank Reardon, struggle against quote-unquote looters who want to exploit their productivity.
Right.
A.K. Lucas is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow. Which is, I believe that's a statement from a former slave, I think, that libertarians co-opt.
Oh, God.
And it's like to say like why corporations shouldn't have to pay like tax on stuff, right?
Yeah.
They discover that a mysterious figure called John Galt is persuading other business leaders to abandon their companies and disappear as a strike of productive individuals against the looters. The novel ends with the strikers plan to build a new capitalist society based on Galt's philosophy. It's so basically just business. Business is always right. The free hand of the market.
Yeah, and again, there are elements that I see agreements for and stuff, and like
that's how they get you in, right?
I guess like why aren't we entitled to the money we earn off our own back? And then it's like, but then that's just the tease that they get you in with, right?
It reminds me of Brexit. So when Brexit happened in the UK, one of the there was a initial from the people wanting to leave. There was a advert released of like, did you know the European Union has like 18 regulations for how big a pillow slip can be?
Mm-hmm.
And on the surface, that does sound ridiculous, right? And why are there 18 different? I'm not sure if this is the exact number. But why are there so many regulations on how big my pillow slip needs to be?
I should be able to have a pillow slip of any size, like
yeah. And then when you look into it, some of those regulations, if you ask people, hey, do you think this is a thing companies should be able to do? They go absolutely fucking not. So, for example, one of them is the material it needs to be made out of. Again, I should be able to make my pillow slips out of whatever material I want, right? What do you mean I can't make it out of this material? Well, one of the materials is a material that downs a lot. And the reason that that's banned is because when you use it in pillow slits for babies and toddlers and young children, it can, down and get stuck in their airwaves and result in SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. Which is probably something you want to avoid, right? And this is the thing, companies would not give a fuck if it was cheaper to make products, but they accidentally caused deaths, they wouldn't give a fuck. Mm-hmm. We know this because companies have done it in the past. For example, with Ford, the Ford Pinto, infamously had an issue where if it got rear-ended, the gas tank was in the back of the car. Mm. If it got rear-ended, it would explode. Just straight up, just fucking explode. And Ford knew about this. Mm-hmm. And in the resulting lawsuit to sue the fuck out of them, an internal document was revealed that Ford knew about it, and rather than recall the cars, they realised that the lawsuits for accidental deaths would be cheaper than the recall. And Lucas, this is why you regulate businesses, because they're the decisions that they'll make if profit is the only motive.
And also, just on a less serious, more, just general rule of like convenience. And obviously you said the word pillow slip, which I say pillowcase. I got a bit thrown off.
I'm saying pillow slip for the Americans.
Yeah, like if I went to buy a pillowcase.
Well, that's the other one, yeah. So I was going to use that as my next jumping off point.
Yeah,
so
if I just go to buy a pillowcase and my pillowcase doesn't fit my pillow, that's really fucking annoying and inconvenient.
Well, I was going to say, yeah. So, and for all the people out there who like just the libertarians who don't care, of like, well, I don't give a fuck 'cause that's not me. Think about how annoying it would be, as you say, if you went to the shop and you tried to buy a pillowcase and it was a different size to your pillow. Mm-hmm. If you bought a pillow from one store and went to another store and it's like, no, we only sell our size pillows. What's one of the other regulations that the EU has of? They have to be this specific size, which is the size that for 99.9% of people is appropriate. Mm-hmm. And if you want to make pillow slips that aren't this size, you have to pay to import them between countries. And the reason you have to pay is because it is now a luxury item. It's like, that's why beds come in like 6 different sizes, because if they weren't regulated to be in specific standard uniform sizes, mm-hmm. then other industries would suffer. Like if beds could be any size the manufacturer wanted, that means now the companies making bed sheets now have to either make them in 500 extra different sizes or team up with that company. Then a monopoly happens. It's like, think about phone chargers. When companies could make whatever phone charger they wanted, and then it became proprietary, and like the EU went, no, fucking cut that out. Make phone chargers universal for customers.
How fucking annoying is it when, I mean, my, little thing in my head thinking about chargers was like, remember how fucking annoying it was when like you had a PS3 controller run out and you're like, where's a fucking mini USB wire that no one's got? But more common is just when either an Android user goes around to an iPhone owning
Apple user's house, yeah,
or vice versa. Like, the amount of people that would come around to my house and be like, well, you've got an iPhone charger, right? I need to charge my phone. I'm like, no, I use Android.
Nope.
Oh, so you haven't got a lightning cable? No, never have done. Oh. And like, the moment you assume that things would just be convenient and work for you, and it doesn't, it's really fucking annoying.
And here's the thing, it is not convenient for companies to make things to the specific standards. Sometimes like the standards are just things like dimensions. Other times the regulations are for safety standards, and they can cost money. For example, cars. There is legal minimums for how safe certain things are allowed to be. And it's costly to reach those minimum standards. And if companies could, they absolutely would not do that, as evidenced by the fact that so many companies just do the legal minimum. Think about food. Like, another one is in regards to food. It is, for example, sausages. Do you know in the UK, Lucas, and in the EU, so like we kept this one, sausages have to legally be at least 30% meat.
I don't know how much Caden Oryx are.
Well, they're going to be. But they have to be legally 30% meat. Otherwise, you can't call it a sausage. And you'll sometimes, if you go to really, really cheap stores, they'll sell them as bangers or some other variation or synonym. Because legally
distinct sausages.
Because you legally can't call it a sausage. And here's the thing. If companies knew that, and you might not think that's a big deal, but have you ever had a shit sausage? Same with burgers.
Yeah.
Or if you want to call something prime beef. Or if you want to sell something as organic or free range.
There's a lot of people nowadays trying to get on the trend of like Wagyu beef, right? And loads of people using different definitions of like what Wagyu is to try and get around it and make it as cheaply as possible and stuff.
And that's what is hilarious, because it gets framed as this thing that's actually anti-consumer, of like, you get less choice. But if anything, it empowers the consumer, because when there's only 7 different options, for example, like with a bed, you aren't empowered. Like, yeah, you can't go get one that's like, exactly to your exact specifications. But when you order a king-size mattress, you know it's going to be the exact definitions of a king-size mattress. And if it's not, you now have legal recourse to sue the fuck out of that person, because they legally have to send you what you ordered. And if the definitions aren't regulated, the company could do whatever the fuck they want. They could just send you a child's mattress. They don't have to send you because what's defined isn't regulated.
You know what it's like?
It's fascinating.
As a weird pull.
Yes.
Is that time where obviously selling standards on eBay are greatly different to like actual laws and regulations, right?
Oh, is this like Xbox, box, and stuff like that?
Well, private sellers not held to the same standards, and generally, if you really fucking argue stuff, like a lot of the time, you can get things safely resolved on eBay.
Yeah. And trading standards will occasionally step in if something's egregious.
But a simple one that was just annoying, but it was £5 and I didn't want to deal with the issues.
Yep.
It was just when I bought Pop-Up Pirate on eBay. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, £5 for Pop-Up Pirate? That's a good deal. Yep. Oh, new as well. Okay, cool. I'll buy it. And then what arrived in the post, Karl? Oh, a tiny little Pop-Up Pirate that's like this big. And it was the travel edition of Pop-Up Pirate.
Yep.
And I went on the description. I went on everything. There was nothing there to indicate in any what way that it was a travel edition of the game that I didn't want. And think about that experience where just I got essentially conned into buying something I didn't want. I thought I had a good deal. But that could happen all of your life for everything you ever buy.
Yeah, and it's that thing of like, everyone always, it's like Mad Max world. Everyone always thinks there'll be Mad Max. And it's like, you won't be Mad Max. You're going to be the guy Lord Humongous, attaches to the catapult and fires at Mad Max. Everyone always thinks like they're the master of their own destiny.
Right? Yeah. Most people died before the camera started rolling.
Yeah. And that's why these regulations exist, and the fact that people fight. And some of them, and I don't think there's many regulations that actually are as, far-reaching, or they represent government overreach as much as people try to claim. So I said in that Brexit ad with the pillowcase example, when I looked it up because I wanted to look it up, one of the literal first things I found is, hey, it can't be made of this material because this material kills babies. Mm-hmm. And if you told people, hey, there's a regulation that stops companies from killing babies, your question shouldn't be, oh, that's government overreach. It should be, why do companies sell things that kill babies? Oh, it's cheaper to make them that way.
Why does that regulation exist? Because if it didn't, they would sell the thing that kills babies.
Yeah, and so let's move on slightly now, because I could talk about this. I'm very passionate about this subject.
I was just gonna say that should have been what they used for like anti-Brexit, is like, the people selling you on Brexit want to kill babies with pillows.
They tried, and people didn't listen. Like another one was like bananas. And like Joe, like all these regulations of what bananas need to be. It's like, if bananas are too bendy, they get sent back. Which sounds stupid, right? If bananas are too bendy, you can't sell them. Joe, the reason why? It's because if bananas are too bendy, they don't stack properly. If they don't stack properly, the boxes don't have as many bananas in them. And it raises the cost of bananas, and it takes more fuel to count them, which is worse for the environment. If we just say, hey, make your bananas grow straighter, it's a bit of a ball ache on the producer side, but once it's done, hey, bananas are cheaper, easier to ship, and get on store shelves faster. And you as a consumer get bananas that are of uniform size, so you always know what you're getting for your money.
One thing I will say is I'd like to see...
Isn't that great?
It is, but I would like to see like more of the things that you see every now and then, where it's like the wonky fruit and stuff like that.
Which is another regulation that they can do that, and manufacturers and producers get a discount for selling that because they realised that the government had overstepped and it resulted in too much waste, which wasn't anticipated. But when it was brought to the government, they corrected, it's slow and it took time. But you see it, right?
Yeah, and that also means that if somebody doesn't care about their food being like perfect looking, I can go buy a bunch of ugly looking strawberries for on the cheap.
And that's one of the things as well that they did. If like after these rules and regulations came in, a bunch of people pointed out, hey, but this is now encouraging manufacturers to throw away food because it doesn't meet these minimum standards. Like, okay, maybe the standards are a bit too strict, and they changed them from aesthetically to nutritionally. And that's why, like, legally some things can be sold, and they say, okay, the tariff on them's lower, so you can ship them for cheaper and sell them for, still make a profit on selling them, because producers realised it was literally cheaper to throw them in the bin than it was to ship them to stores and to get thrown away.
Exactly right. So they would rather just waste it immediately, and it's like, okay, that's not the best, but again, it's course correction and learning over time.
Yeah, and the solution to that isn't to remove all the regulations, because then they're going to start spraying all the bananas with fucking deadly pesticides to humans because it's cheaper to just fucking spray them with that shit. Which is another thing that... Anyway, so context and writing. So Rand's stated goal for writing the novel was to show how desperately the world needs prime movers and how viciously it treats them. So prime movers are like, your business leaders, your thought leaders.
Right, yeah.
And as for context, Elon Musk loved this book.
Yes, yeah.
Basically, everyone who's an arsehole likes this book. And she says, what happens to the world without these people? The core idea for the book came to her during a 1943 telephone conversation with a friend, Isabel Patterson, who asserted that Rand owed it to her readers to write fiction about her stated philosophy. Rand disagreed and replied, what if I went on strike? What if all the creative minds of the world went on strike? That would make a good novel. And the fact she thinks she's one of those creative minds people will give a fuck about if they shut up is hilarious.
Yeah. I was just literally thinking that. I was like, are you really putting yourself in this category of, like, great creative minds?
Yes. Rand then began Atlas Shrugged to depict the morality of rational self-interest. And that's the thing, it's like aggressive self-interest of, like, just absolutely no, like, thought given to the idea of, like, doing things for the inherent public good. Like hospitals and stuff like that. It's like, no, doctors would just naturally arise as a result of the need for them in society. And it's like, but how would a doctor come to exist if there wasn't public schooling to give a baseline minimum of knowledge and education? So no, fuck you. It would just the need for teachers would naturally arise, but where would those teachers come from?
And eventually you go full circle, right? Where, well, people would just do these things, and then people would come together to make sure that these things happened. And then we form a community of people trying to make these things happen. And then we form some kind of like society and rules to make sure that all of these things are done and enforced. And it's like
they just recreate the same system, right? It's like the Rick and Morty thing, which is partially taking the piss out of those kind of like weirdo, super logic, I am pure logic guys, where like they create that energy box, right? And then they go into it, and the
going further down and down and down
because they just keep coming up with the same solution to the problem. It's just recursive, right?
Mm-hmm.
After the conversation ended, Rand's husband, Frank O'Connor, who had overheard, affirmed to Rand that would make a good novel. And also, as well, this is just Rand recounting the story herself. Of just her being like, I had this. It's literally like, I had a great idea, and all my friends are like, you're so smart, you should write that down.
Mm-hmm. You know, who really told me, honestly, with no, like, you know, bias in mind, that my book was a great book? My husband.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure not biased. Not biased at all.
Rand then began Atlas Shrugged to depict the morality of rational self-interest by exploring the consequences of a strike by intellectuals, refusing to supply their inventions, art, business leadership, scientific research, or new ideas to the rest of the world. And the fact that I like that idea right up until she considers business leaders part of that clique. And that's how they get you, right? It's like, oh, creatives, like with regards to the AI thing. Creatives should go on strike. Like, hey, if we don't make any more art, there's nothing for you to rip off. But she also includes in that Disney.
Yeah, and that's the thing, great, cool. Writer strike, SAG after strike. Cool, great. I fully support that. And it's like, oh yeah, but Mickey Mouse is in the picket line with you, arguing for himself.
As Rand completed new chapters, she read them to a circle of young admirers who began gathering at her home to discuss her philosophy. One of my favourite things about Ayn Rand as well, it's just one of those, it sums up just how much of a fucking hypocritical loser that she is. And was. And right, she spent her entire life arguing against the idea of government help. Of asserting with her whole chest that you are only worth what you are able to provide. And if you are not able to like create or provide anything for society, you do not deserve to exist within it. She spent her the last years of her life on government social security.
Of course, yeah.
She directly benefited from the system she spent her entire life decrying. And apparently as well, complained when she didn't get enough.
I was going to say, they should have just seen her complain and sent back a copy of her own book.
They should have done.
Yeah.
Well, that's the
that
thing
should have been
system.
all the help she got, was just her books arrived back in the post.
But that's the thing about the system where it's like the whole argument that she would have and her followers have about like welfare queens and stuff like that. Of like one person is abused, they will hold up the example of a single person abusing the system as the reason the system shouldn't exist. And it's like one person abusing the system. Okay, that sucks, and we'll try and deal with that when we can. But it doesn't detract from the fact that this system helps literally millions of other people, and without it, they would die. And also the idea as well, if they didn't have this system, the world would be worse. Because if we didn't have, say, for example, a social safety net, where would those people go? They're still going to exist. They're still going to need food.
That's the thing, right? Is like all those people. Say an example I've heard a lot is like child benefits, right? And the whole your child benefits being capped at like 2 kids in the UK by the Tory government and things like this. Of like, well, if you have an uncapped amount of children on benefits, then naturally all that's going to happen is every single family that's like one of these like dole people, you know, the dole dossers and all that shit that they like to make up in their brain. Like, well, all of these people that don't want to do anything with their life, they're all just going to spurt out 18 children each. It's like, well, that clearly no one's done that. Like, there's one family in the UK that might have done that.
And they'll get a BBC documentary made about them.
But generally speaking, most families have 2 to 4 kids.
No.
And all of these people aren't having 19 children to just claim off all the benefits, and even if they did, those benefits mostly need to go, guess what, back on the children.
Well, it's the thing. It's there's a great example with like the IRS. Like libertarians fucking hate paying taxes. They hate paying taxes, and the IRS is like the single safest investment in America. There's like some study done by this like the School of Economics or something like that, where it's every dollar invested in the IRS pays back like $6. It is literally the safest investment possible. Same for like school meals. Libertarians, right wing people, they fucking hate the idea of free school meals because they don't want kids getting free stuff. So I didn't get any handouts. It's like, okay, you don't like the idea of the kids getting free food, but if you look at the thing is they claim to be rational, which cracks me up because if you actually sit down and just look at the hard numbers on when you provide these services, yes, the short term we spend money, long term, in areas where this is the case, like children have better educations, which means like, there's less child poverty, which means like the lifespan goes up. They're more likely to go into higher education. They're more likely to go into jobs. And when kids, there's less crime. Because most crimes,
generally speaking, like less, less poverty equals
better society.
More chances of like education, jobs, less crime, and overall that comes back into the, I say, just create a better society in general.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you can't argue against that. Like, literally every single study ever done on this shows that the numbers just go up when you invest in social services. And it's weird how the people who portray themselves as the super rational ones who aren't swayed by emotion, when you bring this up, get really mad and start like spitting feathers. I don't get free stuff. It's like, well, good on you.
It's like, okay, you're doing well enough that you don't need it, and if you get to a point in your life where you're not doing well enough to need it, you'll get it. Congrats, it'll be there if you do need it.
And that's the thing, it's always the classic way as well. Like I said, Ayn Rand rallied her entire life against it, and then when she needed it, it was right there for her. And it didn't judge, because the system doesn't. The system,
and that's the thing, right? It's not
the system
petty.
needs not to. No, because the system is, it's the emotionless, cold, purely logical being that she wrote about as being in charge of the thing. Like, well, yeah, just the system doesn't fucking care. If you rallied against it your entire life, you needed help was provided. And it's a system that you contributed to via your taxes that you didn't want to pay, that you kicked and screamed the entire time about having to pay. The system that the tax you didn't want to pay, which you grumbled about when you drove on a public road, paid for by public taxes, and that's when people say, well, the roads suck. And it's like, well, that's why you should campaign for more the specific way your taxes are spent, not to not pay taxes, but whatever.
It's like you should be campaigning towards your taxes going less towards like military funding and more towards like being spent on public services, not arguing that no taxes should exist.
Yes, but then we have here the influence and the legacy of the book. So Atlas Shrugged has attracted an energetic and committed fan base. Each year, the Ayn Rand Institute donates 400,000 copies of works by Rand, including Atlas Shrugged, to high school students. So they hate handouts, but they give away free copies of the book. Because that's the thing as well. They say like, oh, no, we don't want to give people stuff for free. Getting stuff for free is like a sign that it's not worth having. Because if it was really that good, because the whole philosophy is, if something is worth it, it will be naturally consumed. It will, like the cream rises to the top. Her own fucking foundation has to give away copies of her book. Likewise,
guess what? That's all it's worth. Fucking nothing.
Likewise, there was going to be a film made of Atlas Shrugged. Zack Snyder wants to make, I think, The Fountainhead, which is based on her philosophy as well. But the film was in development hell for years. There's 3 movies. It's a trilogy. Every movie has an entirely new cast, because all the principal actors dropped out between each movie, and each movie gets worse reviews as it goes along. And the movie ended up doing so poorly at the box office, the supposed, completely fair, logical marketplace vehemently rejected this idea. It had to rely on fan funding.
Oh, the irony is just dripping.
And the thing is, if you pointed it out to them, they wouldn't realise. It was like, no, because it's something that we feel needs to be out there.
No, you failed in a free market. Sorry, that's what you were arguing for.
Yep. But no, they discount it. And Lucas, I thought we could end on one of my favourite books. And it's not the book because the book's really long, but I thought we're going to shift focus now, because you shifted focus and talked about Zelda, and now just refer to a Vox article, which will be linked below. And it is a interview with the guy who wrote A Libertarian Walked into a Bear.
Okay, and remember to send me this link so I can actually put it in.
And A Libertarian Walked into a Bear is a story, not a story, it's a book written by, and I have the name of the guy here, blah, 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 Matthew Hongoltz-Hetling. And it's about the time a bunch of libertarians try to prove that their philosophy works by taking over a small town. And I'm just going to read some excerpts from the interview that Vox did with the author. Would you like to just do that to end on, Lucas, to learn about, like, for anyone unfamiliar with like libertarian philosophy, of just how much it fucking sucks? So, this is Sean Illinger Vox. How would you describe the Free Town Project to a person who doesn't know anything about it? Very helpful for everyone at home. Matthew Hongoltz-Hetling. I'd put it like this. There's a national community of libertarians that has, over the last 40 or 50 years, they've never really had a place to call their own. They've never been in charge of a nation or a state or even a city. And they've always really, really wanted to create a community that would showcase what would happen if they implemented their principles, the principles of libertarianism, on a broad scale. So in 2004, a group of them decided they wanted to try and take some action on this deficiency and decided to launch what they called the Free Town Project. They sent the call out to a bunch of loosely affiliated national libertarians, told everyone to move to this one spot to found this utopian community that would then serve as a shining jewel for the world to see that libertarian philosophies worked not only in theory, but in practice. And they chose a real town in rural New Hampshire called Grafton that had fewer than 1,000 people in it. And then they just showed up and started work on taking over the town government to get rid of every rule, regulation, and tax expense they could.
So
this is a real thing.
A town.
They just all moved to this one town and then took over the government. I said the book is fascinating. But this is like a shorthand version of the book, which I would recommend far more than Atlas Shrugged. I rented Atlas Shrugged from the library. It fucking sucks. I took it back. And the thing is, well, Ayn Rand must hate that, right? He's burning in hell getting annoyed at the idea of a book being in a library, a publicly funded library. My book should be given out for free to students by a foundation run in my name, like the market intended.
As you were saying, Karl.
Yep, so why did they pick Grafton? Well, they didn't choose it in a vacuum. They conducted a very careful and thorough search. They zeroed in on the state of New Hampshire fairly quickly, because that's the live free or die state. They knew that would align well with their philosophy of individualism and personal responsibility. But once they decided on New Hampshire, they visited dozens of small towns, picking one that was small enough where they didn't need to like build houses or anything. Because spoilers, none of these libertarians who insist that, you know, they can function well in society without the help of anyone else don't actually know how to fucking build anything.
And that's what should really be done, right? Is that they should have picked a state and then found somewhere that they could try and found a new town on that doesn't already have all of these, you know, buildings made, roads built.
Well, that's the joke, right? They're insisting that, we're going to show that by not relying on public money, we can create a town that works. But they had to build it on the bones of a town that existed because of public money. They built it upon the infrastructure that already existed, like, you know, roadways, electricity, water, gas, internet.
It's like, no, you should go into the fucking woods and figure it out yourself if you really want this experiment to show that it can work.
Well, oddly enough, Lucas, they did try to do that because not everyone could afford to buy a house in Grafton, but they could afford to buy land. So, as the people of Grafton soon find out, non-traditional housing soon began springing up around the town. This included things like shipping containers and mobile homes that form little clusters of cabins and tents. There was also a location called Tent City where a bunch of libertarians just lived in tents.
Living the dream right there. Just homeless in a tent.
Yep. The same thing as well. If you ask libertarians what they thought about homelessness, they'd be all in favour of. Like, when you see those like homeless camps and like some bulldozed in, it was like, it's kind of fucking sucks. Libertarians cheer for that.
Yeah.
When they do it, it's different, Lucas. It's their personal right to live in a tent on the street. But if a homeless person does it, no.
That's not okay.
And then Lucas, like, so how did they take over the town? Well, when they first showed up, they didn't actually tell anyone they were doing this because fuck you, personal response. Why do I need to tell you what I'm going to do? That's my right. with the exception of a couple of sympathetic libertarians in the community. And then all of a sudden, the people of Grafton woke up to the fact their town was in the process of being invaded by a bunch of idealistic libertarians, and they were kind of pissed. They had a big town meeting. It was very shouty, very angry, during which they told the free towns who dared come that they didn't want them there, and they didn't appreciate being treated as if their community was an experimental playpen for libertarians. But the libertarians, even though they never outnumbered the existing residents, what they found was that they could come in, they could find like-minded people, traditional conservatives, or just very liberty-minded individuals, keep in mind this is before the MAGA movement, who agreed with them on enough issues that angry opposition, they found enough like right-wing people that agreed with enough of their issues, in the same way we talked about earlier. You can kind of bring people in by saying, well, don't you hate that you're told how tall your post box has to be? It's like, yeah, I fucking hate that, even though the regulation for your post box, in case like your post person is like short or tall, it also ensures like, letters have to be a uniform size. If your post box is this small, letters, it's like whatever, but fuck it. These people are idiots.
And that's the thing, right, is they've got to go from don't you hate your post box being a certain size to should we overthrow this town?
What's all you get? Like, it's how white nationalists work, right?
Yeah, like that's the thing.
It's
a lot of
really harrowing.
A lot of these people, there's a lot of interviews with people who got dragged into like Nazism, talking about how, to begin with, I just was looking for like a sense of community in people.
Yeah,
and then you slowly get like dragged through the dirt and want to fit in and start listening to all the ideals and stuff. Yeah.
And then it's like incels, isn't it? Of like, oh, I couldn't get a date, and I found a bunch of guys also couldn't get dates. But then the rhetoric becomes more and more extreme, and then they as I became as extreme as that, I started to close myself off to other people, so that became my only in group. And then I was scared of being kicked out of the only in group that I now knew, so I also adopted the more and more extreme policies. And by the time they realised they were too far in, they'd become just Nazi, essentially.
That's the thing, is like you get lost in these rabbit holes and echo chambers, and by the time you realise that, if you ever do realise where you've fallen into and how like ridiculous this has all gotten, a lot of the time they're the only people you got left anyway.
Yeah, because you've already alienated all your your friends and people who care about you just by being just a really obnoxious fucking weirdo. You mentioned here that
worse.
Yeah. I'm trying to be as nice here.
Yes, yeah.
So they managed to get enough people that were angry that they started to work their will on the levers of government. They couldn't pass some of the initiatives they wanted. For example, they tried unsuccessfully to withdraw from the school district and tried to completely discontinue paying for road repairs.
Because I'm sure someone will just do it, right?
Well, someone will, yeah. And that's the thing, is that you always see those stories where like, this guy went out and filled these potholes and then the government told him to take it down. I saw one today. A lady built a bench at the end of a street. And then the council came and took it down. And everyone's like screaming at the council. It's like, well, here's the thing about benches. Like, she might have... You are more than within your rights to put a bench in your garden. And if that bench collapses, you're like, oh no, I hurt myself. But if there's a bench in a public area and it's used by the public and they assume that it is part of public infrastructure, and that bench, it snaps, or there's a rusty nail, we are now liable for that because you fucked up. It's like the people with potholes and stuff. Like, I filled a pothole and the government maybe dig it back out. It's like, well, did you fill it up with the exact right composition of shit that we have to use because it's cars going to be driving over it? It's like, no, let's put concrete in there. It's like, well, yeah, for your driveway has one car going it every 4 hours. This road has 400 cars go over it every hour.
Yeah, there's a reason that we use like asphalt on modern roads and not concrete.
Well, again, you can see how people get frustrated by that. Like that tweet I saw earlier about the lady who put the bench up. Everyone's agreeing with her of like, oh, the council are being stupid. Now there's nowhere for the old people to sit. And it's like, well, what about if that bench collapsed?
And again, these are the kind of issues that
they can get
quite
you with.
Easily get people in with, because yes, on paper it does sound fucking annoying and restrictive.
And the problem is of like trying to explain that to, especially on something like Twitter, if you go in and try and explain what I just said about how the bench could be dangerous or it could potentially pose a threat to danger, or so maybe the place you put it makes it at risk of getting hit by cars, right? We don't know. Like, what about if like maybe the council looked and said, hey, we checked and this is a blind corner, a car might swing around and fucking hit it, or we don't know. Maybe And that's why they actually go through the proper channels. Like if you want to put a bench, then it's of course it goes really slowly, and that's again how you get people in. But I found it fascinating because I saw that and went, well, of course they took it down. What about if I went up and sat on that and you've just not used the right bolts and it collapses? Or I'm sat on there like, with a baby on my lap and it collapses and my baby gets injured. Who the fuck's to blame for that?
I didn't know Karl had a baby.
But I'm using an example,
I'm joking. I knew there's going to be like one person. Yeah. Like, when did Karl get a kid?
And that's an extreme example, right? But the question is, like, they're the kind of things you have to plan for, and that's why these regulations exist. They do have to take into account almost every scenario imaginable. Because in a city, if you've got a city of like 1 million people, if something's 1 million to 1 odds, it's going to happen to one person in that city at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's just
fascinating, right? But so they didn't get rid of the roads, but they were happy to cut services down to the bone. So they effectively put a stranglehold on things like the police and things like road services and fire services and even the public library.
And that's the thing is, when I hear cut back on the police funds, I'm like,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure. When it's like, fire services and libraries, it's like, oh, there you go.
Well, that's the thing, Lucas. Like, it's your own responsibility. If your house burns down, that's your fault, which is fair. And I'd say it is fair if, say, for example, your house burns down and you didn't have a fire alarm, or your house was not built of, like, the place I am right now. When I first moved in, I had to have a fire safety check on it, and the guy went in and he went, there's a bunch, because after the Grenfell disaster, there's now new really strict regulations about what the fuck you can and cannot put inside the insulation of the building.
Because otherwise you can have things
the
like
Grenfell
the Grenfell
disaster. And hey, if I would not have bought this house if it did not comply to the new regulations. And do you know why? Because you can't get it insured.
Yep, and it's like, okay, it might sound ridiculous to you, but like hundreds of people's houses or flats like burnt down in one fell swoop because there weren't regulations put in place.
Yes, and you can say, okay, if your house burns down, that's your fault. But what about, let's say, for example, there's a forest fire. That can happen. Happens a lot in America. What about the forest fire? And there's no fire department to deal with that. That's completely out of my control, but it's something that's going to affect stuff that I do control. It's like that could affect my house. It shouldn't be I don't have the capabilities to put out a forest fire.
Why not?
And if I wanted to, even if me and all my neighbours all worked together, we couldn't put out a forest fire, could we?
Well, I mean, you should be able to, because work off your own back, Karl.
Yeah, but it's like the specialised equipment that you'd require to do it, right? But then, Matthew Hongold's Heltling was asked, so what happened over the next 5 years or so? And Lucas, this is like one of the funniest couple of paragraphs I've ever read. By pretty much any measure you can look at to gauge a town's success, Grafton got worse. Recycling rates went down. Neighbour complaints went up. The town's legal costs went up because they were constantly defending themselves from lawsuits from Freetowners. The number of sex offenders living in the town went up.
Of course it did.
Because that's the joke about libertarians. Because another thing they don't like, Lucas, because they hate rules and regulations. They really hate age of consent.
Yeah.
Yeah. The number of recorded crimes went up. For example, the town had never had a murder in living memory. It had its first 2, a double homicide over a roommate dispute, within 6 months. So there were all sorts of negative consequences that started to crop up, and meanwhile the town that would ordinarily want to address these things, say with a robust police force, instead found it was hamstrung. So the town only had a single full-time police officer.
That's the thing is, like, if you live in a world where, hey, there's rules and regulations in a lot of places, but we've got a place that we want to call Freetown, where you can do whatever you want. Guess who that's going to attract?
Yeah.
A lot of people that don't want to live to, like, laws, like murderers, and worse.
Think of Twitter, where it's like, we're not going to censor anything anymore. What happened? Immediately flooded with Nazis.
And don't forget about pussies in bio.
At one point, that single police officer had to stand up at a town meeting and tell people he literally could not put his cruiser on the road because he didn't have enough money to repair it. They only had, and the thing is though, here's a pro tip. You can't have a police officer, the only police officer in town, say, hey, I can't respond to crimes because I don't have a car, because the worst elements of society will now go commit crimes.
No, Karl, naturally everybody else will stand up and become the police force, right?
Well, they
The
try
police
to.
force that they don't want. And it's like, also, GPD in chat mentions that it was their submission for Ace for Pet of the Week, so congrats to your lovely pet Ace, and, you know.
Hell yeah.
Just, I was about to say congrats to you, but more congrats to Ace, because it's the pet of the week, not the owner of the week, right?
And then, Lucas, you're probably wondering, well, when do the bears turn up? Because that's the name of the book. Like, you know, a libertarian walks into a bear. So it turns out they have a bunch of people living in the woods in non-traditional living situations, each of which is managing food in their own way, and their waste streams their own way. Because that's the thing as well, they don't agree with, like, sewers. So most of the people are just shitting in buckets and dumping it wherever they felt like. And normally there are rules and regulations about, hey, you're not allowed to just shit in a bucket and dump it out in the woods. Libertarians don't care about that.
Guess what? That literally creates a shit town to live in.
Yep. So basically, they were teaching the bears in the region that every human habitation is like a puzzle that has to be solved in order to unlock its caloric payload. So bears in the area started to notice that there was a lot of calories available in the houses. One thing the Freetowners did encourage was, the bears was unintentional. They just threw their waste out how they wanted. They didn't want the government to tell them how to manage their potential bear attractants.
So basically, because there was no waste management, bears started to notice, hey, there's just random foods thrown out all over this town.
And here's the thing as well, animal control didn't exist because they didn't want to pay for it. So the bears could do. So as you can imagine, things got messy and there was no way for the town to deal with it. Some people were shooting the bears, some people were feeding the bears. Some people were setting up booby traps on their own properties in an effort to deter the bears through pain. Others were throwing firecrackers at them. Others were putting cayenne pepper on their garbage so that when the bears sniff their garbage, they would get a snout full of pepper. Which obviously is great when you've got an angry bear roaming around your town with a single police officer in a car that doesn't work. And then obviously as well, just neighbours that just randomly shoot at anything they see walking past their property. That's also makes for a fantastic town, right?
Yeah. When you're walking around the piles of waste and shit everywhere.
It's literally that episode of The Simpsons where Homer doesn't want to like pay for like rubbish, right? Where he gets in the argument with like the garbage men and it's just garbage mountain outside his house.
Yeah.
And he rather than admit, hey, I was wrong, he frames it as a fight of like against tyranny. But all the guy is like, just don't be a dick and apologize, and I'll clean your rubbish up tomorrow. That's all it takes. Is just you a little bit of humility. And something that's the funniest bit of that episode is when he goes to the U2 concert and he goes to the security guard in like a hat with a potato sack and goes, "Potato man," and U2 just let him in. I don't know why that joke fucking sends me. That you can get backstage for U2 by pretending to be the potato man. And the security guy goes, "Where the bloody hell have you been?"
Yeah. Dear, oh dear.
In regards to the bears, though, these were black bears. And anyone familiar with black bears knows they're quite docile creatures. You have all those videos of people like walking outside their house, there's a black bear there and the bear runs away.
I mean,
like,
one literally went viral, I think, this week, right? Of like, a man just walks like into his garage or out of his garage and there's just a fucking black bear there and he's like, well, shit. And they just kind of like edge around this car for a while and both agree like, let's fucking leave it.
Yeah, but bears are smart, problem-solving animals. They can really think their way through a lot of problems. That was what made them aggressive in Grafton. In this case, a reasonable bear would understand that there was food to be had, that he was going to be rewarded for being bolder. So they started aggressively raiding food and becoming less likely to run away when a human showed up, even with a firearm. And that's the thing as well, not everyone had the same solution to the bear problem. So the bears just learned to go for, you know, it's like the Velociraptors.
They started learning to go for the weak.
There are lots of great examples in the books of bears acting in bold, unusually aggressive manners, but it culminated in 2012 when there was a black bear attacking the town of Grafton. That might not seem unusual, but in fact, New Hampshire, the entire state, not the town of 1,000 people, had not had a single black bear attack in a century.
Fucking hell.
The whole state had never seen a bear attack, and now in Grafton, a woman was attacked in her home. The bear broke in!
Because it had figured out there's better food on the inside.
And then, a year later, a woman was attacked not in Grafton, but a neighbouring town because the whole region's bears had become more aggressive. And that's the thing about libertarianism. Like, they'd not only made their town shittier, they made everyone else's town shittier.
Okay. Yeah, my Adobe Audition looked like it had just froze there for a sec, so apologies if there was a bit of a blip in the audio, but I think everything's okay. So we're all fine. Yeah. It was just being a bit laggy because we've been recording for a while.
Yeah, no problem. And that's how it just the article just continues with like, it's a summation of like, here's some other funny stories, but just I found that hilarious. So I think that is such a perfect encapsulation of just what such an awful, selfish philosophy results in, right? Of like, well, someone will just step up, right? If there's a service that needs to be provided, someone will just step up and provide it, right? Not when that service requires specialized knowledge or skills.
No, it's one thing. Every single service that had any actual real effort or problem involved, no one fucking stepped up.
It was like saying, oh yeah, well, roads. Okay, you can make a dirt road, right? People have been doing that for centuries. How about, a sewer system?
Someone will just volunteer to come round and clean up everyone's shit, right?
Probably, yeah. Well, we had that a century ago, right? Where people would just go around and get buckets of shit from your house. But we've got a better system, and it's called a sewer. And here's the thing, Lucas, do you know how to fix or make a sewer?
Am I meant to?
No.
No.
Are you happy for like, a small portion of like what you earn to go to paying the person who does, so you don't have to do it?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So let's say we like road. Do you know how to drive a train?
No, but it's.
Or do you know trains aren't public anymore, are they?
Well, no, but in theory, it's quite nice for public trains to still be available.
Yeah. Do you like buses? Do you know how to drive a bus?
If I tried, I reckon. Yeah. I don't know about a train, but I reckon I could figure out.
And that's the thing, right? It's like, just the specialized equipment. Like,
I'm joking, by the way, for anyone that was taking me.
Like, do you know how much an ambulance costs? It's about £1 million.
What?
Do you want to? Have you got £1 million?
What?
It's close. I think it's like close to that. If you say fully laden, if you consider like the training of the crew, because it's fun fact about an ambulance can go 80 miles an hour without tipping over.
True.
But they are like ridiculously well made things, and they have to be, right? Because like, if it's going 80 miles an hour and you're in the back bleeding out,
you don't want to hope if I'm dying in the back of an 80 mile an hour box that it would be built well. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And can you afford that? Well, how many of those do you think you could afford?
A few quid bank, I reckon.
And then the hospital it's got to go to, right?
That's I could pay for a hospital to run.
Like Karl. An X-ray machine, they cost like 300 grand for an X-ray machine.
Fine.
How many of them do you want?
Do you want one? 2 or 3 backup ones,
Okay, yeah. Do you know how to work it? Do you know how to maintain it?
We'll worry about that later.
And that's the thing. It's like, it makes sense on a very simple thing of like, hey, I want to own my house. It's like, okay, but sure, how's your house going to get power? Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to just build a generator for my house. Okay, that's fine for you. Plumbing, I'm going to build like a cistern for my house. Okay, food, I'll grow my own food. But the moment anything you have to do takes one step off that property, you need to have something.
Oh, I'll just build my own road. Okay, what if someone comes to rob your house? Oh, I'll just protect myself.
Do you want to get post? Oh, yeah, I want to get post. Okay, we need to pay a postman. No, I'll drive the letter to his house. Okay, now we need a road. Are you going to pay for that? You're going to build one house between you and your neighbours? It falls apart with the most basic amount of scrutiny. Like a child could see the flaws in this.
The funny thing is, things like, oh, well, what? You're going to build a road between you and your neighbours? Okay, who's going to maintain that road? Well, we'll start maintaining that road together. And both of us will pay into a shared pot where we both look after that.
Which road. Is what, yeah.
And it just, again, it all comes full circle back to we'll work as a community to get shit done.
They just reinvent the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the summation of like weird tech bros. So they keep coming with their ideas of like, hey, if we redesign roads to be bumpy, these square wheels we invented would work. It's like, or we can just keep using the round wheels that work on the round road. We shouldn't have to redesign all the infrastructure for your shit idea.
It's the same thing you saw with the Hyperloop, right? That we were, referred to earlier. Like, well, all that'll happen eventually is that Elon's super smart, and instead of one car at a time going around a small tunnel underground, he'll expand the systems of underground tunnels and start getting it so that there'll be entire carriages that move all at the same time. And then rather than like one person in one car moving at one time in a small lane, there'll be lots of people all moving at the same time underground away from traffic. But so you invented a subway then.
Well, it's like, as well, it's like Uber. Like there was like, what we should do instead of Uber, we should have just a big Uber that carries, and rather than going to exactly where you want it to, it just goes to pre-designated spots that are popular at certain times.
It just goes around and drops you off at like popular locations, and that'll be relatively close to where you probably need to end up.
Yeah, that's a bus.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like that classic one with America, isn't it? Of like, we shouldn't have Obamacare. What every American should do is just get
GoFundMe.
We should get a big, massive GoFundMe that we should all withdraw from when we run out, when we get ill. It's like, that's what...
Is everyone should just pay like an equal amount into this GoFundMe every month. And then whenever you need medical help, you just go into the big GoFundMe and take out what you need.
Do you ever see that like, Paris has essentially invented, like, they republicized, or they subsidized the railway system by doing this? So in Paris, I think it's still the case now, but it was like years and years ago when they privatized all like the subway system in Paris. You can buy membership into a club.
Right.
And once if you're a member of this club, if you just don't pay, just ride the rails for free. And if you get a fine, the club will pay your fine. And it's paid for by membership dues. And essentially they just renationalized the railways. Because just you join that and just ride the railways. Because they're going to check your ticket one in every 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get a fine, just send in proof that you're a member of this club and we'll pay it for you. So they just renationalized them so you can just ride for free. So you pay a small fee every single month, then you can ride the rails for free.
Then everyone who pays into that system can just ride the trains for
essentially
free.
Essentially for free, yeah. You pay like $2 a month, but because like 1 million people are paying, like, and they're only catching like 1 out of every 500 people, they say, "Oh, send us the fine and we'll pay it for you." And they renationalize their own railway system. It's like, that's genius.
Oh dear. And you know what? If that service existed in the UK, I'd pay into that.
I'd pay that. Oh, ideally, I wouldn't want to pay into it because at that point, someone's then creaming off the top, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem with like when it's a private service. There's always someone creaming off the top, whereas it's only for public good. That's why you have the hilarious, just how wild does every time you see one of those like American healthcare stories of, oh yeah, I broke my arm and now I got a bill for $400,000. And I'm bankrupt and I don't know how to pay it. And I just look at that and go, I'm fucking glad I don't live there.
Yeah.
There's no other reaction, is there, besides just incredulousness?
And the worst part is that the people who like don't have insurance are getting fucked over even harder because they basically overbill because they know that insurance companies argue down the price to like 10% of what they bill. Because
they want to make their profit and the insurance company also make their profit.
Mm-hmm.
And in the middle is just you getting fucked over the entire time. That's the thing. If I broke my leg, right? If a meteor came through my ceiling and hit me, I could go to the ambulance. I could call an ambulance and go to the hospital. And at no point would I be thinking, "God, I'm gonna be skint after.
I'm gonna lose my house now." Yeah. It's like it's wild because I know that I've heard people argue before. Yeah, but they don't actually expect you to pay the amount that they bill you for because they overbill because the insurance companies argue it down to like a minimum amount. It's like, well, what if you're not with an insurance company and you're poor?
Also, as well, here's the thing. Also, let's just say, what about if I've got other things on my mind, like being ill? Like, I'm ill right now, and it ruined my entire week. I couldn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Now imagine on top of being ill, it's like I've got to call up a company and argue that to get the service I pay for. So it's annoying enough when like your fucking internet goes out or something, you got to call up and get it fixed. Imagine it was just like something that felt as fundamental to your existence, your survival as a person, as access to healthcare.
And I'm sorry, you paid for, especially to like American listeners right now, for just reminding you of that shit system.
It's wild, right? 'Cause libertarians, they not only don't mind that system, they want it to be even worse. They don't even think insurance should exist.
Yeah. What a weird mindset.
So, Lucas, scary. Yeah. Isn't it scary that out there are people who not only like this book, they think that its philosophy should be applied to the way the world works?
The only real thing I can think of is that it's people that want to sponge off the infrastructure that's already there because they don't want to have to worry about that.
They're convinced that they're independent. It's like your cat thinks it's this independent master of its own destiny as it sits in your house.
But it's also just like those people the ones that genuinely believe in that kind of shtick must think that just like they have like, you know, main character syndrome of like, but it wouldn't happen to me.
Main character syndrome to the nth degree.
Mm-hmm. And it's just living an entire life philosophy behind the concept of, but it wouldn't happen to me.
Yeah, I'd figure it out. It's like, I forget who said it now, but it's like you throw them at, do you know those guys who are like, oh, like if I needed to, I could survive in the woods. It's like, okay, I'm going to throw you into the woods. How long would it take you to come back out of the woods with a fucking pencil? Let alone, I don't know, a smartphone, a car.
Yeah.
The ability to lay, like, you know, mortar.
It's the same
The ability
thing,
to forge iron.
Like, oh, what would you do if you went back in time? Well, I'd just invent the internet before it was invented.
Okay, how?
How do you know how to do that? I'd just invent the iPhone. Do you know how an iPhone works, and do you know how to build the infrastructure to make an iPhone work anywhere else?
And all you have to do is you keep walking it back. It's like, well, I'd be self-sufficient. It's like, okay, what would you do? I'll build my own house. So you know how to build a house. It's like, oh yeah, I know how to build. I know how to, like, you know, lay foundations and bricks. Okay, do you know how to build tools? What? Well, you know, you need tools, right? Because you can't go to a store and buy them because the store doesn't exist. Do you know how to forge iron? Okay, but first, before you've got to forge iron, you've got to build a forge. So now you've got to make a brick. Do you know how to make a brick? Do you know how to make mortar? How do you make that without the tools?
And do you know how to, like, yeah, do you know how to start mining and digging for the materials that you need and then refine those materials?
From who? Yeah. Where are you going to go? Oh, I'll just drive to a store and buy one. What store? What road? You're not using the road. Fascinating, right? It's terrifying that the people out there legitimately think this is it. This is the one. This is the winner.
It's like it's literally it's the kind of system that works millions of years back in time.
It's the kind of system that works if you're a fucking idiot who doesn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm not taking it seriously at all during this conversation, because it doesn't deserve to be taken seriously.
The entire premise doesn't work because, again, the first thing that they needed to do to prove that it could work was to go to a town that already had infrastructure.
And then they immediately made everything worse.
Yeah.
Which is like, just directly contradicts their own point. Like, they've literally, like as this guy said, by every single metric you use to measure success, they did worse. Mm-hmm. Not a single thing in that town got better.
And that's the thing. What happened to the person when they got attacked by a bear?
Well, they shot it with the gun that they didn't make. They bought from a store.
Well, yeah, and if they didn't have a gun and they got injured, what would happen then?
Well,
would they know how to save their own life in a
skill issue,
critical injury?
Skill issue.
Yeah, it literally is. It's survival of the fittest, and I don't think any of the people that think this way are going to be the fittest people that survive.
Well, to be fair, the person who's going to survive is the fucking bears, by sounds of it.
We've gone through this many, many years ago. Many, many years, way before, you know, modern existence of lifetimes. Guess what won out? Being a community. The people who refused to become parts of communities died out.
Yeah, they wither on the vine.
Yeah. Now, this got decided millions of years ago.
And everyone who's ever, like, you know, tried to make it a reality or prove that it works it's always failed in hilarious fashion. Like I said, even the movie based on the book had to rely on crowdfunding, proving that the philosophy doesn't work. They have to give away copies of the book because it doesn't sell.
Because it's worth nothing to us.
Yeah, people don't want to seek it out. Like the genius of Ayn Rand, it's not going unnoticed. It's been rejected by the same market she said should decide everything. Which is hilarious. Like, she came up with this entire philosophy, and then her own philosophy is like, well, you fucking suck. It's why, like, Metal Gear Rising makes fun of libertarianism. And, like, all the characters, like Armstrong, for example, talks about how only the strong should rule. And, like, I should be like, you know, everyone should rule their own destiny. And Ryan's like, well, I'm stronger than you, so what happens there? I can just kill you, and I win?
No. You should let me live. It's like, no, but that's not how it works.
Yeah.
I'm looking out for me, and me is stronger than you, so I win. Like, no, they don't want to hear that.
Yeah. It's like Raiden, just like when Armstrong talks about how, like, you know, every man will be free to fight in his own wars. But it's a war you started. They've got so you're going to start a war that you expect other people to fight in. But also your whole campaign is that everyone should, like, believe in their own
for
destiny.
themselves.
What about if they don't agree with you? Well, they should die. Well, that's not freedom, then, is it? Dipshit. Only the strong should rule. It's like, but I'm stronger than you. Now what? It's almost like this isn't a good way to run things.
Mm-hmm.
And all it results in is just fighting.
Yeah. Again, there's a reason why humans built their entire, regardless of like what part of the world people came from, every single different like, you know, race and culture decided to work together to make things better. And like, yes, there are microcosms of like different groups of people not wanting to work together.
Like the Amish or something like that, right?
But like, well, I just mean like, you know, world conflict and shit. Like, there are constantly wars happening, but that's because one group doesn't like another group. There's not a conflict if it's one person versus a group.
No. And if you expect people to fall in line with you, then that's a group then. It's not an individual decision, it's a collective decision.
Yeah.
That's like a hilarious thing that Revengeance deals with, which is why it's a fascinating game to play through. Like the bit where Armstrong's like, oh, it's going to get the economy booming again. And Ryan just points at him and says, you're wasting billions. How is spending billions on a fucking war? And he's like, because it'll create opportunities. We're going to arms manufacturers, Jack. All those people paying taxes. It's like, why not just build schools? Right, what a scary thought, eh? But there are people out there who look at Armstrong and go, yeah, this guy's got a point.
I mean, he's charming. He is Answer Duncan, so...
Yes. And I guess just to end on, we've got Beth Marriott in chat. Her ex, I'm assuming it's always with the name Beth, but their ex, their friends went freedom camping, ignored all their advice, and came back the next day shitting themselves and drinking river water. If only there was like some way we could regulate like water quality to make it potable, and then developed a system where we could get that water to people's houses for immediate access, and then you paid a small fee for guaranteed access to said water, and the money that you paid then ensured that the systems and infrastructure in place to keep the water safe to drink was maintained.
If only
that way, yeah.
If only that would happen and they wouldn't put shit in our water, Karl.
Which is the thing, right? And that's why that's how the libertarians get it. But it doesn't work the way. So it doesn't tear the system down.
If regulations weren't in place, there would be more shit in our water.
It would be worse, right? It's like ultimately the end goal of the system they're trying to tear down is that I can press the tap in my house and clean, fresh water comes out of it. The end goal of what the libertarians want is like there's no tap. Because there's no pipe. I've got to have a well on my property that I dig for myself. And then that's my water. And I have to go down every fucking day.
And filter it and shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it does remind me of the story of like there's been a rising trend, I don't know if it's like just in America or just in general, of people not having pasteurized milk and then like
raw milk, yeah.
Getting like deadly ill from it. And it's like, no, there's a reason that we put regulations in place to have pasteurized milk and no, we don't want pasteurized milk. We want true raw milk. It's like, okay, good luck with that.
The best response to that is like one of those shit-ass politicians is like, well, we can buy raw milk and can make it safe to drink by just heating it up slightly. And he goes, that's a really interesting idea. You should probably explore what that does. Maybe come up with a name for it. Like pasteurization.
And I'll make sure we chat. If ads do run on our live streams, we do have to make some level of money. We are literally on the most conservative amount of like automated ads possible on YouTube.
Ironically enough.
It's literally the least amount of ads that we can have running automatically.
We should have like 8 billion ads.
So we do our best to keep it at a minimum, but we are like trying to earn some small amount of money out of making content. It's not us trying to like, if we were just trying to get people to join memberships to get ad-free viewing, we would just cram the shit out of like every video as many ads as possible. We literally put in like as bare minimum as we can get away with.
Yeah, man. Unlike that town in New Hampshire, that got so many bears. Not the bare minimum. That's the bare maximum.
That is.
Maximum bears.
Imagine, like, just dying on the hill that this is the best way to live when it caused the only bear attack in the entire state ever. But it's the true way to live, Karl.
No, they couldn't even get. Like, and then say they want to scale that up, and their argument is if we scaled it up on a mass scale, it'd definitely work because we'd be able to, like, you know, implement our systems on a wider scale. It's like that's what the government is. Like they don't understand scale.
No.
Like they can't fathom the scale of what needs to be done to create like a functional town, let alone a city, let alone a country.
You know, I say just let's find them a big plot of land where they can all go and figure it out for themselves.
Well, they've tried it. They keep trying to do seasteading. Like there was one where it was like a bunch of libertarians trying to get like a boat or something, and all go on the boat. Do you know when crypto was getting real big? It's like we're going out the crypto boat.
You know what? That makes perfect sense. That
they bought
people
a
and
yacht,
libertarians are the same.
But they didn't pay to maintain it, and they just assumed that they'd be able to like figure it out, and it sank. Because they all got onto the boat, and then they realised no one knew how to drive the boat, and they thought we'll just float in the water. But it's like boats need maintenance, and it sank.
At some point, it's just natural selection, isn't it?
And you know what they did? They called for the Coast Guard for help.
Yeah, of course they did.
Yeah, and that's at that point. This should have been The Simpsons, where it's like this Coast Guard should be like, wow,
again. Them. I just think when Ayn Rand like puts in a request for like government assistance, they just send the book back to her.
Send a copy of her own book back.
Oh dear, oh dear.
I just to end on that, I forget who it was who did that. It was I think it was Jack Daniels, maybe. But like they got like a really weird, threatening letter from a lawyer, like filing some like frivolous lawsuit. And what they did is they just sent back a letter on company letterhead, just saying, yeah, we think someone's stolen your stationery and they're sending stupid fucking threatening letters to massive companies. Maybe you should like check. They didn't even acknowledge like the threat. There's like some idiot is like stolen your stationery. Maybe we should go check that out. So they didn't even acknowledge the basis of their argument because it wasn't worth engaging with.
It was just, well, this is so stupid that it couldn't have come from your actual company.
Yeah,
you might want to get that looked at.
Yeah, we don't even need to engage with the content of it because it's so stupid that we're not going to waste our time. We're just going to tell you that we got it and we don't care.
It's like, this is so dumb, it must be fraud. You might want to go check that out. It's like, what a way to deal with a stupid...
What a dumb thing, right? It's like that one of like...
God. Anyway, I think that's a good place to end.
That is a long-ass podcast.
That is.
The energy that I needed sustained.
And, at very least next week, if not further on from then, next week we know for sure we have already recorded it. Yes. It won't be a live stream. Like, we've literally already done next week's podcast.
So, spoilers.
So, maybe the next couple of weeks are going to be pre-recorded ones. And start getting your pets of the week in as much as possible because it's going to be a wild couple of weeks of not being able to game the system and vote at certain times and submit pictures at the right times because it's going to be the wacky wheel of just like random days when I can record.
Can we just do like a slideshow?
I mean, maybe. You know what? The problem is that adds more work onto me.
I'll do it. I'll do a slideshow.
Get less.
Can I record like just a small video of me just doing a slideshow for Patreon or something?
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
Just me reacting to all the Pet of the Week picks. We'll see. Anyway, that's it's
a discussion for another day. But yes, thank you all for joining. It's been a pleasure.
See you all next time.